Hello, you are listening to the Mantic Universe podcast. I'm Chris, and as ever, I'm joined by my good friend Clem.
Hi, everybody.
And we're honoured today to be joined by our good friend Gerry. Hey, Gerry, how are you, sir?
I'm full of the joys of spring.
Even though it's autumn.
Shh. Spring somewhere.
It's spring somewhere.
It's a mindset.
Absolutely.
It's a mindset.
Yeah, in the other hemisphere. Perfect. Spring is in your heart, dear listener. So, guys, shall we make a list of all the people who are cowards and did not join this recording to talk about the Clash of Kings book? A list of cowards, who wouldn't stand with us and get it all wrong. No? Good.
We'll leave that to the listener. Yeah.
So, to wildly speculate. So, yes, unfortunately, Mark had to go into the office on a Sunday, which is always rough going. But other people may join us as we record, dear listener. And to be fair to Gad, it is literally the middle of the night and he's working tomorrow. Tomorrow is his Monday. So, fair enough. So, Gerry, thank you so much for joining us, sir.
An absolute pleasure to be invited. It's nice to get out of the house.
So, Gerry, do you want to just give us a very, very quick history? Because let's be honest, you're a big deal, Gerry.
Well, I'm big, I'm tall, and these days fat as well. So in that regards, yes. For people who are unaware of my work, I'm part of Beasts of War, or on Tabletop, as the family-friendly version is the. So people will often see me towering over other opponents across the table, or sometimes getting to interview really nice people. So it's interesting to be interviewed for once. This is what this feels like. It's all very mellow. I don't have to think or anything.
Perfect. That's the MUP spirit.
Wait, we have to think?
Best not, Clem. Best not. Scary things might happen. So, guys, we have read, quote unquote, the new Clash of Kings book, guys. Very exciting stuff. But let's do the usual sort of housekeeping stuff first, dear listener. So let's go through the notes. So we've got the welcome on the menu. That's what we're doing now, dear listener. We've got our introductions. We're going to talk about the Clash of Kings book first, right, Clem? I'm looking at the menu and I'm realizing this hasn't been updated. So let's talk Clash of Kings book. Let's talk Kings of War. We're then going to talk about Warpath and Firefight and Dead Zone. We'll then go to listener questions. We might come up with the topic of the month on the hock. Gerry, as you're here, maybe we can talk about On the Tabletop. Wink, smiley face. And there we go, guys. This is the biggest episode of the year, and we don't have proper show notes. But it's the MUP charm, right, dear listener?
We had to. Otherwise, we would lose the originality and
spontaneity. These are all positive traits, right? Super, guys. So the Big Red Book. So obviously we're not going to explain every little facet of it, and let's be honest, we couldn't if we tried. But let's talk a little bit about it. So the two factions on the front are the Trident Realms and the Forces of the Abyss, and we found out that flaming magic swords do indeed work underwater, and a demon in the depths can fight a naiad or whatever quite competently, which I wasn't sure about. So that's positive.
So you actually read the fluff?
So we have fluff on the Forces of the Abyss and the Trident Realm, dear listener. I skimmed over that, I've got to be honest. But Gerry, I think you're going to save the day and just pick out a couple of little tidbits of new lore.
Yeah. Some of this, I don't know how much of it is new or how much of it may have been buried in other places. But the interesting thing for me, there were two, one really for each faction. Forces of the Abyss, it expands upon where they are in Panathor. So you get a nice detailed sort of run over of what the Abyss is. If people are picking up Clash of Kings and haven't read the background, which is either downloadable from Mantic or in the old Green Book, but a lot of people are picking up the free rules, so it's nice to have both Trident Realms and the Abyss getting their background, their stories straight, shall we say, in there. But there is mention of the rifts that have opened across Panathor for the abyssal forces to sort of well up from, and how everything is connected in a way to what's happening around it. But it mentions specifically that there are a couple of other massive rifts beyond the one that is sitting up at the scar with Halpi's Mountain, where the Brotherhood used to defend it. There's one way to the south, far beyond the Ophidian Desert and the cracked lands, and around that is a lush, verdant jungle where the trees are made of flesh and bleed, and other craziness goes on. And one is underwater, close to the Trident Realms, which is means they've been fighting their own war for some time. So it's interesting that they're pulling the strings a little bit there, moving the world further away from just the Mantic continent in the middle, and potentially then we may see expansion in either of those directions in the future as well, which is really nice. I enjoy the world building beyond such a narrow sort of focus that it started with. It makes it feel like there's something else. It's not just all the land masses on the front and then the back of the globe is just all water. You know, that there's something else out there. There's stuff beyond the regions that we currently deal with. So fascinated to see where that goes in the long run, and also sort of reinforcing some of the big names that were in there previously. So the Lord of Lies, if people weren't aware of him previously, because I know a few people, when they seen the model, it was like, ooh, who's this? I was thinking, well, I played with him in second edition, because he was part of the Abyssal Force then. His rules have become Bial's rules, more or less, with his stealthy lightning boltness. So the Lord of Lies has been sort of created anew for this as that sort of avatar of Oscan kicking around the place. So that's the Abyssal side, where it's more of a geographical nod, telling us a bit about what's going on beyond the realms of Mantica. And then with the Trident realm, two little nuggets that I quite like. One is they're really reinforcing the three realms of the Neretican Empire. And this really comes across with the explanation of how they essentially worship Cthulhu-esque old ones. And I'm a huge fan of Cthulhu, as anybody who's ever seen me talk about it at any stage will know. It's one of my favorite games slash IPs, mythoses, whatever you want to call it. So you get this more in-depth part of the three kingdoms with Medusith, Mirim, and Illithith, which are all very lispy. But even in the army list then, the Trident King, that is currently just a blob on a chariot of your ilk. With the rules now, you take your Trident King from one of those three realms. He has specific upgrades that he does for those, and it more defines the Trident realms as individuals who work towards a common goal, and then at the same time their own old one god at the massive at the bottom of a abyssal crater, like a huge Cthulhu lurking there, is where they get their power from, and they're on a power level with the Shining Ones, and possibly even predate them. So I just, in one case the Abyssals have gone wider, and then the Trident realms have all gone deeper into the abysses, so to speak. And I love both of those things. It's great to do.
That's super cool. Yeah, who doesn't love H.P. Lovecraft's writings? There's loads to unpack there. I think one thing, so a lot of fantasy properties tend to start out as Tolkien light, and then if they survive long enough, they kind of find their own feet at some point and start to do their own things, which may or may not be interesting. And I think that Mantic is, or the Kings of Warlore is very much in that kind of, they're working out what it is to be Mantic, right? To mantify something and to do their own thing and make up their own factions. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think for a long time now, it feels like the Night Stalkers were the big baddie, but traditionally, of course, it was the Abyss, right? They were the big baddie, and they're the classic demon force. And it's interesting to see them come back. It's super cool. You mentioned that you could have a really horrible, very distinctive table with sort of fleshy, horrible trees and grim horror sounds super, super cool on the tabletop. So that sounds amazing, Gerry. And just as a general point, how much lore do you tend to like in your games, Gerry? From how you've answered that question, I would say quite a bit. But how much flavour do you like?
Yeah, quite a bit isn't far off, to be brutally honest. There are some fantastic game systems out there, and then there's some fantastic backgrounds that are attached to mediocre or terrible game systems.
I have no idea what you might be referring to there, Gerry.
And I always work on the principle that I can take a different system and play the same game, but it's the narrative, it's the background, whether it's the concepts and the design, even if the miniatures don't always transpose that to the table, having the touch points, having the backgrounds to work from, I've always really, really enjoyed. And especially when you were talking about your own visit to Clash of Kings and having a themed group, we used to do that. The Northern Ireland ETC team spawned out of a grand tournament team I used to be part of called the Northern Wasters, and we started as all playing Chaos, hence Northern Wasters. And then over time,
plus you're a bunch of wasters. I mean, it's perfect.
From the north, yeah. And then over time, it developed into every time we went to a GT, we would pick a theme, and we would have a narrative theme that we would build into all of our army lists. So even though there was 10 or 12 of us would be going to these events as a group, so we were a fairly large team. It was always the narrative side, which was really fun, because I would tend to build narrative lists, and I find that more amusing than building competitive filth lists. And a lot of times people are so caught up in the meta that if you bring something that's very narrative driven, they often they see things on the table that they've never seen before. I brought an ogre list to a Kings of War tournament once that I'd themed heavily around the warlocks and Nom Nom, and it was very lightning bolt and berserker heavy, and at that time nobody was taking those, and nobody at that tournament had a clue what was going on, as I outshot elves with ogre lightning bolts and boomers and the like. So yeah, the narrative background I think is key for anything, because that's what hooks people and what draws people in, because it's not often that you'll go, I've got this really great rule set. What's it for? It's just a rule set. It's not a great way of encouraging people to try it. Whereas if you can go, I've got a fantastic rule set, Dead Zone. It's all about these, sanctioned moons or planets or areas, whatever they happen to be, or Kings of War, Firefight, the like. The narrative is what hooks people. The narrative is what keeps people coming back. Otherwise, we'd all just be playing chess. So I think the narrative is really core, central for anything I do, certainly.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Gerry. Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, my Clash of Kings army was Northern Alliance. It was almost all infantry, not because I thought that was a good idea, but it was my story. We were the garrison of a town that was destroyed. We were tricked out by goblins. And it didn't make sense to me that we would have a load of Frostfang cavalry or something. Why would we have that if we were grimly manning the city walls? But then we were tricked out by the goblins, and then our first battle was against the goblins. So, we went and got our revenge, which was really, really cool. So my very good friend Tom from Ireland came over and with his incredibly beautiful goblins army. And it really was one of the best games of Kings of War I've ever had. And it was just so many little crazy moments of, Hearthguard fighting against mincers and goblin slashers being one-shotted, and them one-shotting my human clansman hordes with their shooting. And it was just, there were so many moments in that game. Unfortunately, it was the first game of 6, and by the end of it, I was done in. But it's just amazing when the dice and your poor decisions tell the story of the battle. It's just amazing. Let the story unfold with the game. Super, guys. So so dear listener, please do read the lore in the new book. It sounds very cool, and I will definitely read it myself.
I have to say also, when I skimmed through the book, because I wanted to get the first impression, it's a pretty book, like there are cool art pieces, nice pictures, and it's always a pleasure to get new stuff or like a new pretty book. So it's a small detail, but it's always enjoyable.
It's small but important, and you're right, Clem. I think Mantic are just getting better and better at all this stuff. I think it seems to me that they just really have an extra level of care that goes into it. I don't know whether it's just one final polish or something like that, or I don't know, but it's just really shows. And I think I can recount a little story from my time at Mantic Night on the Friday. I can't remember the chap's name, and it's almost certainly for the better. I don't recall his name. I bumped into the very nice man with a very big camera, and I said to him, I've noticed, so how did I describe it? So it's basically what happened was I asked him if he was new at Mantic, because I implied that the photography had got a lot better, lately. And he said something like, no, I've worked here for about 14 years. But I didn't outright say that, but I'd said too much. My reaction said the story of, and he's like, no, I've been here 14 years. So I put my foot in it, basically, dear listener. But he did say that he was splitting his time between two jobs with Mantic. And more recently, they managed to get the balance a bit more towards photography. So he said, no, the difference is just having extra time to actually take good photos. And I think this is super important. And it's really good that Mantic are addressing this, because I think, to be honest, this has been an issue they've had for a while. Because, Gerry, I don't know if you agree or not, but I think there is, if you talk to certain people or you read certain things on the internet, there is a feeling that Mantic model, some people think Mantic models aren't necessarily the best. And I think that if it was ever true, I don't think it's true anymore. I think Mantic make lovely models nowadays and reasonable priced. But I think sometimes with the photography, Mantic don't put their stuff in the best possible light, which is a shame, if that makes sense. So I'm really, really glad they're putting more effort into the photography.
Yeah, 100%. They shot themselves in the foot an awful lot for a long time with not just the photography, but the paint jobs, whether they were being done in-house or being done by staff, or I'm not sure. But since they started getting studio paint jobs done either by Angel Heraldez or other studios, the quality of those paint jobs went up significantly, and then the photography followed, because lots of times people were saying, especially you'd see it on Fanatics or Kings of War Forum, a teaser would come out for something and people going, I don't like the look of it. And then they actually get their hands on the miniature or the sprues. It's like, no, it's just the paint job, or it's just the picture on the website. It doesn't look great. Whereas when you actually get it in your hand, it's fantastic. So, I mean, things like the new Lord of Lies model is outstanding. Waiting for that brick of resin to land at my doorstep. And I think that shows the quality is there, and now the presentation matches the quality. And they're still keeping it a relatively decent price point. I think the Lord of Lies comes in at half the price of a Bloodthirster. So, you can't argue with that, really.
I think I'm actually going to pick one of those up just to paint it, because it looks so beautiful. And I've seen the model in the case, the studio. It's stunning, absolutely stunning, amazing paint job, but the model itself is gorgeous. So yeah, looking forward to that. But but interestingly enough, so I've been chatting to my good friend Chris, who was on the last episode of Mup Shorts that we did about Clash of Kings. Can't believe I got him on a podcast, to be honest. That's absolutely amazing. But we've been talking, and I think we're both going to come back to Clash of Kings next year, and we're both going to do the Trident Realm. So we're looking for 2 more Trident Realm players to join us on our story, which is going to be a continuation of the Northern Alliance story from last year. So yeah, really, really excited about that. And I've gone all over the place, because I think with the Trident Realm list, you can do about 3 or 4 different things with the army, and I think you've really got to pick one, because there's lots of auras and synergies that mean, if you try, the things are quite expensive, so I think you have to kind of pick naiads or pick frogs or pick deep ones and really lean into that heavily, rather than do a bit of everything. But yeah, I've done a test model. My placoderms are going to be, I'm actually going to use Mantic salamanders. I have a few of the PVC placoderms from Mantic. I don't have enough of them, and they're PVC. They're okay PVC models, I would say. So
you plan to spam placoderms?
I'm going to do 2 regiments of placoderms, and I think I'm going to use the Royal Guard keyword, and so they'll get elite. So yeah, defense 6, 15 attacks. Yeah, and then I'll have some naiads. I love naiads, so I'm always having naiads. And then I'm either going to have the Oceanborn Worm Riders, or I'm going to have the Riverguard Dam Busters as my sort of hammer. But yeah. Oh, and I would mention as well, actually, just while we're talking about this in such incredible detail, is I think the Siren, she can do something like four different spells on her turn. She's got 4 spells and she can do all of them. So for 100 points, that sounds amazing. So I think I've got the Mantic model for that. So she's going in the list for sure. But yeah, it just looks like a lot of fun, to be honest. And as Gerry mentioned, the Trident King, you pick which king of which kingdom he is, and then you either get an Elite Aura, a Rally 2 Aura for Dam Busters, or a Life Leech 2 for Naiad's Aura. So it's pretty juicy stuff. I mean, really, you want all 3 of them, but you've got to pick. And the formation as well can give a Stealthy Aura, which could be really, really good as well. So yeah, so I think there's an awful lot to unpack. I think we're definitely going to have some test games this year. But yeah, and the list I take to Clash of Kings may very well be completely different to the one I'm planning today. Clem?
Yeah, the main question is, will you buy some command dice for your army? Well, we haven't talked because we're supposed to do the Clash of Kings review right now. Remember?
We're getting there, buddy. We're getting there. It's much style, buddy. It's much style. I already have some Vanguard dice, Clem. I never used them, but I have them. I have the Vanguard book, and I have those dice.
With points, I meant. So maybe we should start with how it works. I think it was explained in some videos here and there, right? Like you get some base dice just for having an army. Mm-hmm. It does not depend on the size of the army, from what I understand.
Doesn't seem to.
And it doesn't also say if there's anything special for ambush. So I suppose you're free to use them in ambush if you want to try it. It doesn't really feel like it's targeted at ambush, though, but anyway. And then you can buy additional dice for your heroes. Just 1 dice per hero, and so either the strongest, middle, or weakest dice. And they cost, I think it's 10, 20, and 30 points or something like this.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so the main question is, where will those points come from? Like, are you building your list with, like you would take normally, magical items or, spell upgrades and so on, and instead put dice, or will you just ignore them?
So I think it was a really cool idea. I kind of had this idea that heroes that didn't have unit strength might be able to get a dice, like a set dice. It doesn't work like that, which I think is a bit of a shame, because I think that would be a really interesting kind of list building trade-off, right? Do I want unit strength 1 or do I want a good dice? It doesn't work like that. So it seems like basically every character can purchase a dice. My good friend Andrew, local to me, obviously we're the cool guys, right? But he ran some numbers through Python, and he reckons the more dice you buy, it drops off very quickly how efficient it is. So his suggestion was buy 1 cheap dice and call it a day. So spend 10 points and that's what you got.
I kind of disagree with that, but I haven't played it or haven't ran any.
Go for it, Clem. No, go for it, buddy. Go for it.
No. I mean, it depends on the factions you play, obviously, but so each faction gets 2 orders to begin with, plus there are a bunch of generic orders that you could give, or like special actions you can do with the power points that you get from the dice. And some of them, I think, can go pretty well with some armies. So I guess it also depends on how you build your lists. Like one of them, if I remember correctly, you can expand the range of a spell 3 inches. Is that right? It's not cheap to do. All right, like you won't do this for every single spell, but if you have a critical surge to cast, or a critical Baneshant, or this type of things,
lightning bolt, whatever.
Yeah,
it might
maybe
be.
to finish off something or stuff like this. I think it could really save the day. And then on the faction orders themselves, so every faction has 2 of them, whereas one is more offensive, one is more defensive. Some of them, I think, are really worth the points. Yeah, what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, Clem, so I think definitely right. I think I'll just explain quickly the Trident Realm ones, which I've read, just to give the listener an idea of the flavour. So, for example, the 2 faction orders for Trident Realm, one is called Hardened Shell. It costs 2 command points, and it's used in the range phase. This order can be used twice per player turn. This unit gains 1 bark skin token. this token is removed at the start of the player's next turn. So the reason I think this is super powerful for Trident Realm in particular is that normally for Barkskin, you have to roll against something's defense. But if you've got, so for example, if you've got Placoderms which defend 6, it's really hard to get Barkskin on them. But this just happens. You don't have to roll. So I think for things like Placoderms and Gigas, this is really, really big. So you're putting, ablative wounds on something that's already incredibly hard to kill, and you can do that twice per turn. So, I think that's really powerful. And then the second one is called Hidden Paths, and that costs 3 command points. Use it in the movement phase, and you basically give the unit Pathfinder for that turn, which, again, that could be super, super powerful, right? You're making a charge, or you need to run onto an objective, is something I think people will probably overlook. That could be super powerful. So I think those two things could be super powerful. And then, of course, as we've said, there's kind of a laundry list of other ones. I mentioned sorry, Clem, go for it.
No, I just wanted to say one detail. I don't think we mentioned it. These orders can only be used once per turn, I believe. So it's not like something you will spam like crazy either, right? Like it's definitely something that can bring in some spice, but it's not like, hey, I want to buy 5 dice so that I have tons of powers and we'll just spam this stuff. This is just not how it's going to work. But yeah, for most factions, what I could see is you definitely will want to use them. Like if you play a game that uses the dice, I think my take right now, before having played with them, my take is it would be foolish to just go with the 3 base dice that you get for free. Like you get 1 low, medium, and 1 high for free with your army. I think I would still buy some more just to make sure that I can pull off some of the orders. Another one that I find very good, potentially too strong to be honest, is for some factions, because some of the orders are repeat between factions, you can gain regeneration 5+ until the end of the turn. It doesn't work for units that have defense 6, but on a defense 5 hammer that has already 8-10 damage and is about to break, suddenly getting in a regeneration 5 can be like a massive thing, I think.
It could be, buddy, but then you could whiff your rolls. It's only 1 in 3 statistically are going to hit, right?
Fair.
And you could roll. You're right. It could be. I think in edge cases, they could all be super powerful, right? If we look down to the most expensive one, Vigilance, this is basically a do-over in melee, right? You can just, if you roll really, really badly for 6 command points, which, let's be honest, is massive, you can do a re-roll, which could potentially be...
Yeah, no, it's not a re-roll, it's a redo. You start over the whole combat.
Exactly, you start the whole... Yeah, exactly, start over again. So they could be super, super powerful, but... There is a genuine cost to them. Some of them just cost 1 command point and they're, relatively, mild, but there is a cost to using these things, right? There's cool. Guys, what else have we noticed in the book? There's obviously all the usual kind of changes we would expect and rebalancing and all the rest of it.
This is Andy from Mantic Games, and you're listening to the Mantic Universe podcast. So much universe, so little time.
Well, what else have we noticed?
There's one rule change, right? Is the fact that now when you are wavered, you are allowed to change facing. So if you were charged in one flank only and get wavered, now you can change facing to face your attacker. It's kind of an edge case. I don't remember that happening to me too often, or like, oh, that's so bad. Like, obviously, I get wavered, but they would turn around and not get a flank again next turn. But I don't think it's controversial in any way. It feels more like some small cleanup that they've done, and it's a good thing, I would say.
Being wavered is bad anyway, so I think that's a positive change. I prefer that.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So there are new scenarios also, but I did not try them out yet. So it's hard for me to really wrap my head around, what they really bring to the game. But in general, we've talked about, trying other games and playing other stuff and so on and so forth and getting back to the games you love. And every time I come back to Kings of War, I'm like, yeah, the scenarios are really a strong point for this game, because it's not just try to remove units off the table. I'm trying to achieve something and do something. And then on top of this, you can obviously tell a story, but just from the tactical challenge, for me, it's a lot more interesting than just murder stuff. And I even especially like it when you can win a game with having killed less than your opponent. I think that's, for me, it's very satisfying intellectually. And so my point is, I love that they're bringing in new scenarios, because I think it's already a very strong point of this game. And so having more of them is great. Did you guys look at the scenarios? So
what I think is super interesting, so people who I've given a demo of Kings of War, some people have said they prefer progressive scoring, because at the moment, Kings of War, traditionally, you work out how many victory points you've got at the end of the game, right? And you need to rebalance a scenario from the ground up, really. So the fact that they've introduced now progressive scoring scenarios, there's one called Rack and Ruin, there's one called Bulldog, that's super interesting to me. But the other thing that I actually think is more interesting is there's a narrative scenario called Awakened Giants, which is obviously, Kings of War is a really good tournament game because it is such a fair, balanced game. But I love that they're putting in narrative scenarios. Because
do you know where this scenario comes from, right? Do you know where this scenario comes from?
Vanguard.
Of course. So you know what I think of it.
That's all the time we have for this episode of.
Say not just Vanguard. It spawned from Vanguard into Armada, because Armada, they took the giant scenario and used it Release the Kraken. Everybody loves a monster going mental in the middle of the table.
It's so fun, isn't it? Absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely. So, Clem, we might have to have a game of that this weekend.
I think so. Yes. That sounds like a good thing to try out. And what else did I see that was noteworthy for me in the book? One thing I was curious about was, did they do anything to the ogres? Because, some people have rightfully or not complained about ogres. And yes, there is a bit of a change. And it's a lot more subtle than I was expecting, but it is great. Did you see it, Chris?
No, I did not see it, sir. Were you expecting them to nerf siege breakers? Is that what you?
Yeah, pretty much, because I still have the feeling that siege breakers are not that much more expensive than all of the other types of ogres, and they do everything better. Yeah, like they are the same speed. Well, not as the. I think the
Braves or something.
The Braves are speed 7, but all the normal wires and the boomers, they are speed 6. They are also speed 6.
They hit harder. They're higher defense in the front.
They also hit hard. Yeah. So everything, and they also give one of the big thing that you see in ogres lists is the warlock. The warlocks, so first of all, they inspire, so you don't run out of inspiring in an ogre's list usually, but they get +1 dice on their spells, so drain life and lightning bolts, up to +3 for ogre's units in the vicinity, like within 6 inches, I believe. And that gives some potentially nasty combinations, right? And Gary?
Well, there's a couple of things. So they've added the mercenary or merc keyword. And if you look, it's not been added to the siege breakers. So siege breakers do not generate dice for the warlock.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I was getting to. Like that's the subtle nerf. It's like you can still take them, and they didn't lose much on the surface, like around it, but they don't feed your warlocks as much. So the warlocks still inspire. To be honest, I could have seen that gone, because there's already a bunch of inspiring in the ogres list, so that one, whatever. But the fact that the siege breakers now don't give the +1 dice, I think is huge. And I need to double check. Didn't they also drop them to speed 5? I think they did. And I think this also makes a difference. It's subtle, it's speed 5, not 4. I would have done speed 4, to be honest. But I hope now you will see not just siege breakers in lists. That's kind of the point.
Yeah, sounds really cool. And it's such a delicate balance, isn't it? Because we want people to take them, but what we want is there to be meaningful options, right? Because it's so easy to nerf something and then suddenly they're never taken, right? The hand is too heavy, and then we go from siege breakers being in every army to never seeing siege breakers. So it's a very delicate balance, isn't it? Particularly in a game so finely poised as Kings of War. But yeah, that's interesting. Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think they also went up in points a tiny bit, like plus 5 points on the Horde, which is basically nothing, except it breaks people's lists, right? So if you had a 2,300 point list and you had 3 hordes of siege breakers, well, now you need to save 15 points somewhere.
Drop a magic item, also, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And guys, so I think just to come back to it then, what do we think about this idea of the dice? I think the idea of the dice is cool. I encourage everyone just to try it and see what they think. Play, 6, 7, 8 games and see what you think about it. My only little concern, I think I mentioned it on the last pod, was that there are some movement tricks with the command dice. So, for example, Emperor of Dust, they're shambling. You can one unit can lose shambling for a turn, and I worry that might lead to gotchas. But overall, I think this sounds super cool. I'd love Firefight for the command dice. I think I'm not even sure I'd play Firefight were it not to have the command dice. Gerry,
I have to say I really like what they're doing with it, and I imagine Fanatics is probably on fire right now. But I'm very mellow these days in Tungarnera. I just live in the Kings of War forum because I can't take the stress. But there's a couple of things. The command dice, your returns off the dice themselves are relatively low. You're going to be getting 3-ish per turn from the sort of the base set. So if you really want to lean into the command orders, you're going to have to pay for the big blue command dice that has no blanks on it, which is great. So 30 points is not a sniff for a Kings of War list. That's a big chunk of all of your points. I mean, how many magic items are weighing in at around about 30 to 40 points, the big hard hitters, and you're going, well, sometimes it's difficult to fit that in if you're not getting a sharpness because you're taking a command dice instead, then so on and so forth. Second thing is that the orders are so situational. You can't plan your list around them because you never know you're going to get them. But I come from a historic wargaming background, and the use of command and fog and friction in games is huge, where you may not activate everything every turn because you're limited to your pips, for example, in DBX style games. So you're always having to make your decisions for your army on the fly and think, right, this turn I want to do all of these things, but I've only got enough resource to do 3 of them or 2 of them or whatever it happens to be, and you have to then prioritize. Likewise with the command orders, you're going to get that where you'll roll a really good roll some turn and you might go, well, I've got access to all of these, how best can I use them? Being on the clock is possibly going to be an interesting one, because you're not going to have a huge amount of time to plan out these things. So it's a different resource management is a different skill set, because I know some people who plan their armies in blocks, and it doesn't matter what you set up against them or where you deploy what you're playing. They know block A goes on the left, it does this. Block B goes in the middle, it does this. Block C goes on the right, and it does this. And be damned the scenario or what your opponent does, they will hold, move, smash, shoot, whatever it happens to be, and they can more or less play blindfolded behind a screen.
Do you know, Gerry, this is exactly what I did at Clash. So we looked through the scenarios the Friday night before, and I realised that for all of the scenarios, you had a legitimate chance of winning if you just win 2/3 of the board. So my plan was completely, so based on what the board looks like and the terrain, I'm just going to completely give up on 1/3 of the board. I'm not even going to try and contest it. And then just make sure I win the centre and one the other third. And then I just, on the coffee table of our Airbnb, I just set out my army and I'm like, okay, this is how I'm going to deploy to achieve that aim. There might be a couple of units that move from here or here, whatever. But actually the amount of thinking time that managed to cut out on the day, it made it a lot less stressful. And then I just knew if I just deploy like this, I'm not making any horrendously stupid mistakes. Just do that, simple. And it worked really, really well.
Yeah, and that ties into how Kings of War plays against the clock. So I don't know how much we'll see the command orders in tournament play over the next year. I think some tournament organizers will be possibly worried about annoying the competitive player base, because when you play competitively, if you want to play at a high level, it's all about removing
variance or uncertainty, right?
Exactly. So you pare the uncertainty back. Anything that's random is bad for a tournament list, and therefore command orders are bad. But I'm hoping smaller tournaments and narrative tournaments pick it up, because part of this will come down to feedback. There's a tendency to panic when anything new comes along. The command orders themselves, out of the 9 universal orders, and then every army has 2. The majority of them are movement based, which is all about Kings of War. It's all about movement. Then the rest are sort of drip into whether it happens to be a bit for shooting or a bit for fighting. You're not going to win a game off these. They may give you a nudge or maybe help you. So those times where you're in an edge case where you're thinking, well, I'm expected to do 10 points of damage and I might break them. This might buff you slightly. But it offers up some interesting changes to playing. And if people have been playing for a while and playing with the same lists for a while, they'll find their game will change very dynamically because of them. And I'm all for that. Even if it just turns around that people come back and go, we like them for narrative, we're never going to see them competitively, and Mantic go, okay, that's grand. But I think people need to give it a go and feedback. And here's a point, and I feel that MUP listeners will get this right off the bat, and the fanatic crowd who are screaming at the TVs probably won't be friends of this. But feedback is not aggressive criticism, saying, I hate these, I don't want them. That's not feedback. Feedback is, we played with this and reposition, which costs 3 movements to allow me to sidestep my full move, far too powerful. It either needs to up by double the points cost, so maybe it's 6 points or 6 command points to get it off rather than the 3, or something like that. That's what feedback is about. What you
providing evidence.
Yes. And that's key with any rules testing. That needs to sort of come to the fore.
It's not just a shrill noise.
Yeah.
Well, this plus it has to be kind of experience based, right? Because you can read the lists, read the book, and think you know better, but nothing replaces actually taking it to the table and playing with it. That's absolutely true.
And Clem, what's your take? What's your hot take?
On the dice, I like them in general. Like, I love them in Vanguard. I think that's what really gave an additional layer to this game. And yes, it was more complex than Kings of War. And yes, it's a skirmish game, but it might take longer than Kings of War game. So what? That's fine, right? Like, there is more things to do. There is more strategic layers to it. I'm happy to take more time with it. That's a criticism that I've never found very valid. I understand people who say, well, I don't want my beloved games to be turned upside down or modified too much or modified for the sake of being modified. This is a fair worry, but having read the book now, my initial impression is that it's still pretty tame, like what can happen from the dice. And so it's just a tiny bit of spice on top. And at the very least, I'm very excited to give it a try and see how it's gonna feel while you play. And I think also I want to give Mantic credit for putting this out in the one Clash of Kings before the next big edition, because to me that's a very smart and participative way of developing their game. Like, they didn't say, oh, we have this great idea, we want to do this, and that's how it's going to be. They thought about something which, to be honest, we've talked about on the show as well, right? Like, it makes sense. Like, the command dice mechanism is in basically every single one of their game, except their flagship game. So it made sense that they wanted to try it potentially.
And move it to D8s, Clem. Move it to D8s. Gerry.
You like fire.
I think it's also worth looking at what they've done with the special faction orders. because obviously some of them are doubled up in places. That's not to say a faction will have exactly the same pairing as another faction, but Abyssal Mutations pops up for both the Abyssal Dwarves and the Abyssals, allowing them to reroll failed regenerations on one unit for that turn. Having something like that helps develop individualism between armies. And people, sometimes you see a criticism of Kings of War, the armies are all identical. It doesn't matter what you're playing, they're all pretty much the same. This is another way for them to individualize how an army plays and lean into a theme behind an army without having to add in a ton of additional loot to rules, whether it's new keywords or additional faction-specific things. They can just go, this and this is key to the army. The Abyssal Dwarves are whatever they happen to be, regenerative and elite warriors. Therefore, we give them diabolical fervor and Abyssal Mutations, and that sets them apart from regular dwarves, or from, taking your Trident Realm army or your Ogre army or whatever it happens to be, and you can just do little tweaks like this through Clash, and it gives them a whole other flavor and sort of variance within their play style. Then that you can go, well, that is more narrative driven than gameplay mechanic, and it's not always there, but the idea that the army as a whole has this sort of hanging over it helps them to set them within the world and within the narrative that they've already created, and then they can sort of build on from there as well.
Oh, Gerry, you've just got me very excited about this now. Fantastic. Yeah. Great, guys. Super. So, yes, I think we've talked about Command Dice. I think we're positive. It seems like a cool idea. It's a nice way of getting a little bit of extra flavour in the armies. I think 2 per army is not too much as well. I think if it was, 10 per army, we're like, hang on a second, it's not realistic. People will know this. But if you just, with 2 of them, you can very quickly, as you're talking with your opponent about their army list, you can just go, here are my 2 command abilities. This is what they are. And I think, you've got a good chance to understand what they can and can't do with them. So that, to me, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm looking forward, Clem, for us trying this out this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you made a good point as well. I think it's one additional small layer, but it still stays within Kings of War, right? It's not, because in some other games that you play, I mean, for me at least, I just give up trying to understand what my opponent's army does. And I just wait for stuff to happen and them to tell me, oh, no, by the way, this unit just dies now because I can do this. It's like, oh, I didn't expect that. What happens? It's like, oh, yeah, it's in my book. There's a special rule. And
it's called Foot of Gork, and it's on page 48.
Yeah,
I'm not going to get my book out to show you, but if you want to call me a liar and make me show you, then we've got a situation.
Right.
Brilliant.
It sounds stupid, but it really happens.
No,
right?
it's a thing. It's a thing. Yeah, absolutely.
And
it's just not fun.
We're not quite there yet with Kings of War, thankfully. And I think you made a good point also. Like, this is something that will just be on the list somewhere, and you can integrate it very easily into your playing, and you will not throw everything upside down and destroy the game we love. So I'm actually excited for it.
Gerry.
Another nice thing about it is, if you're introducing people to Kings of War for the first time, you don't have to use them right off the bat. You just go play regular Kings of War as is, and then add it in as an additional layer later on with some other rule sets, Infinity, Malifaux, things like that. They've got an absolute ton of rules that are baked in. You can't pull them out. So introducing a new player to it, you're pretty much having to go, here's a 200-page rule book that you're going to learn right off the bat. Whereas with this, because it's part and parcel of the phase, but it's a little thing separate at the moment, you just go, okay, we're just going to play Kings of War. Here's how you move. Here's how you shoot. Here's how you win the game. Just always roll 6s and you'll be fine. And then at the end, once they've got the game, you can go, okay, well, there's this other thing. And now that you've learned the rules, here's how you can, on occasion, break them or twist them a little to your advantage with the command dice. And this is your general doing the do. And it may encourage people to take some of the lower level heroes as well, that maybe they were looking at going, well, he's 60 points, he's 80 points. They both inspire, but the 80.1 has this and this. which makes them better. And then you go, well, he's 60 points, he's inspires, and with 20 points, I can bring him up to the same price. But now he's got a command dice. And now that gives me the potential of an additional thing that I think would really help me late game. If it happens to be moving people into position to score or regenerating wounds or whatever it happens to be. Boom, 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 boom. And you can then see value in some of the heroes that never get a chance to walk out on the tabletop because somebody does it better than them already. Now you can go, well, here's a little dice bearer coming. And yes, I do have the Ogre Warlock carrying the dice for turn counters, and I'll probably be using one of those to carry my command dice onto the battlefield. And then sacrifice it if it goes badly wrong.
Fantastic. Super, guys. Great, guys. So what do we think? Do we have what else do we have to say about the new book, guys? It's really cool. Please buy it, dear listener. Yeah.
Sounds about right. Yeah. No, I think it's a good addition. It's a good addition to the game. And I'm looking forward to people having it in their hands and start playing it. And I need to update my list as well. I've been a bit lazy to try to do it with a pen and paper because obviously we have the PDF, but the companion still doesn't work with it. Yes, I'm excited for the new season of Kings of War. And again, I think it's really a big advantage of the game to have rules updates every once a year like this and new stuff and get back.
And we all get new stuff. It's not just one army gets a new codex or whatever. Gerry.
Yeah, I'm 100% with Clem there. I think most of us look at it as a must-buy anyway. But a couple of standout things for me, apart from the two new lists or the printed lists, because I'm a fan of printed lists anyway. They're really leaning into the ambush sets as part of Kings of War armies. So again, encourages new players.
That's a cool way to build, right?
Yeah, because all of the ambush sets that exist are in the army lists now as their little
formation.
Yeah, thank you. It's the cold setting in. Formation. So all the formations are tied to the ambush set. So yes, if you're starting, you're getting that, and then you're building them, and people will be going, well, you shouldn't have built them like that. There's a better way to build them. Now, build them like that because you can still use them. They have value in a full Kings of War army, which is fantastic. And the other thing I'd really like to see is slap bang in the middle is a big narrative section about the Deepwater campaign. And if that is not the summer campaign for Kings of War next year, I will eat my hat and everybody else's hat if they send them to me. So the Deepwater Crusade is all about the Abyss slashing at the Trident Realms and the revenge of the Abyss for what the Trident Realms did during Halpi's Rift and the last war with Winter. The Trident Realms have just been apparently bubbling around in Panathor for a while, just annoying all of the Abyss all of the time and not really getting much credit for it. So it looks like from the artwork we've seen on the front cover, some of the double page spreads, Abyssals and Trident Realms are almost undoubtedly getting a new 2-player starter set. And I imagine we'll also see this as a big summer campaign because the setup is there, including a spoiler for one of the realms. So I'll let people read that themselves. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes in the future.
Yeah, and those starter boxes are always such brilliant value. I always like to pick one up. You get the new book with it, and it's just fantastic value. And the fact it's Trident Realm plus Abyss. My ship has come in, so to speak, pun intended.
Hey there, I'm Brian.
And I'm Rick.
From Dead Zone, the podcast.
And you're listening to Mantic Universe Podcast.
For everything Mantic under the sun.
And we're very lucky to be joined, Gad. So we've literally just finished our Clash of Kings book review. Gad, you've just joined us at the perfect time, buddy.
Hey, guys. So sorry, man.
No worries, buddy. No worries. At the beginning of the episode, I was joking around that, all these people that signed up for this, apologies for the swear word, shit show, just cleverly avoided it not to be on the MUP book review, which are, historically a little bit shonky, Clem. How would you describe us? Come on, let's get some positive spin on this.
always stirring some controversy, which is great for media, right? But I think Danny will be happy that we get someone who knows how to play the game. No offense, Gerry, but Gads is an actually good player. I don't know about you, Chris, so much. But,
hang on a second, Clem. Hang on a second. Gad, you and I have played 3 games of Kings of War together. What is the historic record?
It's 3-0 somehow.
Gad is a good friend. He's a good guest.
I don't know how either, but it is 3-0.
Chris,
that's the thing that
happens. Someone you don't kick their butt unless they ask for it.
Yeah. Soon, Chris. I'll catch you the next time, for sure.
So, Gad, I'm going to suggest, I don't know this, but I think, were you involved with playtesting for the new book?
Yes, I was one of the playtesters. I was one of the 2 playtesters along with Paige, aka Newbie Dice. So yeah, there were a few versions of the command dice.
Hey, look, Gerry has not been plugging his own YouTube thing. So, Gad, don't come on here turning up late, plugging other people. No, people should listen to MUP. Listen to more MUP, everybody.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, forgive me, it's 3 a.m. where I'm from.
Yes, of course, I'm just teasing. Hey, Gad, so we've done I think we've done a solid 8 out of 10 job of reviewing the book. What is there, we've talked about the command dice. We're excited to try them. We think they add a nice layer of flavour without being too much. We still think it feels. Yep. We still think it's going to feel like Kings of War. Gerry did a great job of digging us out when it comes to the lore, so that was good. Okay. We talked about a few little changes. Anything else? I appreciate it's 3 a.m. for you, buddy.
I'd be curious to hear your opinion on the current version of the command dice and how do you feel about them and what you would have seen instead of if you had variants that you would have preferred maybe. And otherwise, as you playtested as well and have a better understanding of the so-called meta, like where is the game at, maybe you have some insights into this for us, because when I read the book, I haven't played a single game with it and I don't understand the game so well, so I cannot say, Glade Stalkers are now dead or whatever, So what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think first of all, we went back and forth on how powerful we wanted the command abilities to be. I recall there was one point in playtesting where they were debating whether we could have command abilities that work once a game. So you only do it once a game. But I think it got overly strong. Like some command abilities gave your entire army some new ability for the entire army, which wasn't fun. I mean, if in one turn everything dies, it's not fun when you play Kings of War. So we went through a lot of versions, but even if you notice, even from the abilities showed by Carl in the Mantic video, there has been some further changes, revisions by the RC. So it's been toned down a bit, even more, which is, I feel, is a good thing. They are being very cautious with it. They don't want to go too far with the changes. So I think, to me, I would really use command dice like I would liken them to items that. Like the points you spend for items now, you could spend on command dice instead to have different kind of 5, 10, 15 point item abilities per turn. Yeah, so that is how I would see it. And it'll be interesting to see whether players still take items or they take command dice instead of items, or they take both. How did you find? Just ignore.
How did you find that trade-off, Gad?
It's an interesting trade-off. It really changes how you build your list quite a bit. And you will also see this is something we noted in playtesting. You will also see people actually buying more items. Like they would buy like the 5-point items, like a Blade of Slashing, because there's a command. There's a command dice ability where you can reroll 1 hit, so you can combine that with a Blade of Slashing. So you reroll 2 hits. So it adds up. It's a small effect, but if you can combine it with other items, it adds up.
And you could do it every turn Yeah.
Every turn, and you could choose which unit has it, as opposed to an item. The item is stuck on the unit.
Dad, how did you find? And one thing we were speculating on, did you find that having these 9 command abilities plus your 2 army ones, did it increase the amount of thinking time you had to do significantly, or do you quite quickly get to grips with it?
Yeah, I think at first glance, people are like, "Oh, we will spend a lot of time thinking about which one we want to use." But if you think about it, a lot of the command abilities are quite situational. You won't use it unless you really need to use it. Like, I think the reroll to hit, reroll to wound abilities will be the ones very commonly used, and a lot of them are very expensive anyway. You won't have enough command points. So if you don't have 6 command points, you can't use them. Yeah. So that one, and also the faction abilities. I think people will steer more towards the faction abilities. So I think they have been quite they costed 3 to 4, so you don't really need to buy extra command dice. And they are in most cases quite flavorful. Like I like how they use low blows for the smaller factions. Yeah, so it's quite flavorful and cute in that sense.
The more we talk about it, the more clever I think it is. Actually, I think it's a really, and we have to try it, of course, dear listener, but it really seems to be at that really sweet spot of adding flavour without. Yeah, it still looks like Kings of War, It's still a game about movement and winning on the objectives, etc. Yeah. Fantastic. Super. Guys, do we have any other questions for Gad? I'm very conscious of the fact it's 3 a.m. where he is and he has to work in the morning. So,
yes. I would still like to hear what you think will be the strong armies in 25. Like, what's the winner of Clash 25, the book with updates? Or what's the loser of it, or what are you excited to see come up in the game? Because ultimately, I don't feel there's been major changes, but I probably missed it. So,
okay. Just I think looking at the armies that really benefit from it, I think both Trident and Ox, they get a way. They get the same command ability. I don't know if you guys talked about it yet. So giving an unit ability to get Pathfinder is very, very powerful, especially for Ox and Trident Realms. I think Trident Realms, they're still missing the hidden ones formation. So now with Pathfinder, that really helps. And for Ox, they have been traditionally a bit slow, cumbersome. They don't, they always get stuck in terrain. So with Pathfinder, that really helps them a lot. So in terms of which armies are stronger, I think Ogres definitely took a hit. The Ogres players.
Yeah, we mentioned it a bit. Yeah.
Players definitely have to be a bit more creative. They can't just spam siege breakers. I mean, they are still strong, but yes. I think the Merc keyword, looking how you can maximize it, would be interesting for Ogres. So Ogres probably, and Twilight Kin. I think Twilight Kin. We were debating a lot about the nerfs to Twilight Kin. I think we didn't go too far. There were a lot more nerfs for Twilight Kin.
What about the mutants, Gad? I haven't noticed. Did mutants get nerfed?
Small nerf. I would say it's not a big nerf for them. They still cost the same. They still hit as hard. Just that there is a bit less synergy with the navigator, which is good. You might see people not having to bring the navigator. You might bring other units instead. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds really cool.
Only thing that I saw for the Twilight Kin was obviously losing Piercing 1 with the Wicked Miasma. You still do damage, but not with Piercing 1 anymore.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very reasonable change. And there were also some auras, like the Impalers lost the
Twilight Kin.
Which Twilight Kin keyword, and therefore they cannot get whichever aura. I think it's the Vicious aura, right?
Yeah, Vicious aura, yeah.
Which sounds kind of like a small change. Also, the Blood Hex is more expensive now, which also sounds fair.
For 5 points, it was so strong.
Yeah, 5 points going to 5 up.
It's only one turn, but normally you know what turn is going to be the key one, right? So it was super powerful. Yeah.
And
it sounds like a nerf, but not a crazy nerf either.
Not a crazy nerf. And also the adjustment for the Void Skiffs. I think the Void Skiffs were too good for the points. So they got a slight point increase. and their blood hacks got more expensive as well. But void skiffs, they're not great. I mean, it works sometimes, and you spend a lot of time trying to adjust for the arc for shooting. I think when I saw one of the Crash games, one of the players, he almost timed out because of it. Because you have to be so precise. You have so many of them if you want to shoot with them. Yeah, so they're okay unit.
The other small nerf that I've seen that's also sounded reasonable was the Druid, I think, right? The Force of Nature, like the Ring of Harmony, or what is it called? I think that changed as well. Or am I making this up? Again, it's like tiny changes here and there. Nothing from what I could see, but I'm known to not see things, so
things are unchanged.
Yeah, so another one maybe I would like to share is the Sylvan King upgrade. When you upgrade it to a Wanderer, I don't think you can get the bow anymore. So that one was pretty strong. A few players were bringing 3 kings with 7 shots each, running around, boosted with items as well. So you can have Rampage or Slayer. Yeah, so that one was that was a big change. I mean, small changes like the Cavern Dweller. I think that one got a good change with Vicious and Wall Charge 2. So it's nice. A small change. Yeah.
Sorry, Gad. While we're talking about it now, what about the I think I never played against them, but what about the Glade Stalker? Archer unit. People were saying they were super powerful. Are they called Glade Stalkers? Am I getting that wrong?
Yes, they are called Glade Stalkers. So I don't think they suffered. I think the Elf command could actually help them, but it's only 1 unit, so I don't see them being affected much by it. I think the Elf commands are not that powerful, I would say. Yeah, so it's not game breaking. There's not a lot of changes for them. It's about I'm actually interested to see more Fireball, because there is a command ability that gives additional range for spells. So Fireball 12 inch isn't great, but if you can add additional range to a Fireball, that could really help.
Yeah, funnily enough, Fred took a lot of Fireball to Clash of Kings, and I was lucky enough to play against him. It was really nasty. It was horrible. Lots and lots of chucking fireballs at me. It was rough times. Yeah, with shattering as well. Nasty.
When you get in range of them, like the Abyssal Dwarfs, there's a local player who has a bunch of fireball that can do something, but otherwise, it's always a bit hard to justify a 12-inch range. So, as you said, that's a good point. Expanding precisely on the fireball, not just on the Baneshant or stuff like this, will also make a big difference potentially. Like if you have Fireball 10, suddenly you get in range, that makes a difference.
Yes, definitely, for sure. I think the ability to lose Shambling for the Shambling armies, I think most of them have the command where you can lose Shambling for a turn. That could really open up new strategies. Like you could fly air elementals 20 inches, and so that's interesting. Something that your opponent probably has to bear in mind. You could move your Shambling unit 20 inches instead of 10.
Yeah, but then they lose the support potentially. So I agree, it does bring something new, but I don't think it's game breaking, or I'm not too worried about it. Because I remember Chris using the scout moves with some of his units in the very first few games we played together. It's like, oh great, I can move my troops forward.
Oblivion. Exactly.
Just throw them forward. It's like, thank you for feeding me 3 units.
Half my army dead in round 1. Thank you very much. Gerry.
I was just wondering about Ferocious Charge, which is a new rule that we haven't talked about, because that looks like it could be an awful lot of fun, and again, thematically fits in with a lot of the armies and units that it's been given to.
Yeah, it's not exactly a new rule. I think we had it introduced for the Night Stalker Shadowhounds.
Sorry, Gad, do you want to just explain what the rule does before we talk about it?
So basically, Ferocious Charge gives you +1 to hit if you're not hindered. So it can be pretty powerful. I think there are a few there's a few faction orders, I should say, that gives you Ferocious Charge, but with specific qualifiers. Like you do not want to give a Horde of Knights ferocious charge. That would be too powerful. Yeah. So, and also only certain units can benefit from it. So that's an interesting rule. Along with could also mention the few factions have the ability to give Thunderous Charge 1 as part of their faction order. I think Halflings are a major winner in Clash. Thank God, because I'm a Halfling player. I was the second best Halfling player last year in Clash. So giving the ability to give Thunderous Charge to a unit, in any unit, so that you can give it to the Troll Gunners or the Trolls, Forest Trolls. So those units already have Pathfinder or Poachers. So because for Halflings they don't have Bane Charm. And even if you bring the item, it's they're all spell ward, so it's difficult to get it off. So giving them the ability to get Thunderous 1 and having the name called Low Blows, which is quite interesting. They're all small guys going in for the low blow to get a Thunderous 1. It's quite cool. And also the Sorcerer. The Sorcerer has been reduced in points by a significant amount. I don't know if you guys saw that. It's like so much cheaper now, because people were comparing the Navigator to the Sorcerer, and like the Navigator gives you a aura that always works. Why isn't the Sorcerer doing something similar, especially at that price? So I think they have listened to feedback. So the Sorcerer definitely would be definitely a much better option now at the price cost.
Guys. So do we have any final thoughts on the new Clash book before we go on to talk about Games of Kings of War?
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
Sorry, Gad. You're very, very welcome, buddy, to stay with us as long as you like. But I'm very aware of the fact you've got work tomorrow and it's gone 3 o'clock in the morning. So feel free to stick on, or feel free to.
I'm happy to stay on. I mean, I would just like to share that I think locally, players are very excited for it. At least in my scene. I mean, they don't know what the full extent of the changes, but judging from the reviews of Mantic and all that, they are quite excited. It's something new. It gives. I think one of the playtesters said it well. Every faction will have 2 Christmas presents to use for the next year. It's something that their faction is quite unique. It helps the faction. And if you notice, one is a defensive one is an offensive one, typically. So there's always a chance to use either one of the faction orders.
So there we go, guys. Should we move on to talk about some Games of Kings of War we've had?
We could do that, or also maybe do a quick round of Mantic news.
Mantic news, yes. Oh, of course. Yeah, fantastic.
For sure.
This new thing, I don't know if you've heard about it. It's called Clash of Kings 25. It's a cool book. Should we talk about it?
Hey, I had a test game of Worms, and it was fun. It was pretty fun. I nearly had a test game of Halo, but my wife called, so I didn't manage that. But it looks cool. It looks very similar to Dead Zone. I've got to be honest, actually. I'm a big Halo fan, but I'm actually a lot more interested in the Dead Zone universe now than I am the Halo universe. But I've ordered the big Halo box. It'll turn up at some point, and I will run some demos and try and get some people interested in Mantic. But looks cool. Looks like a very clean game, as you might imagine, with its DNA in Dead Zone. But Clem, what Mantic news do we have?
Just to stay on Halo, so they haven't hit the shelves yet, right? The boxes.
Not yet. November. That's the
latest is November, and also all the pre-orders from people, they should also receive them late October, early November, something like this. Is that the latest?
I think so, buddy. I think as a Pathfinder, I've put myself down for a test pack, and I think that's on its way to me, but I haven't got it yet. So I think they were hoping to get that to us a bit quicker, but it hasn't quite happened yet. But yeah, it's going to be super easy to paint and super easy to get out and play some test games. So yeah, I'll see if people. People have been messaging me saying they're interested in Halo. So so hopefully it's a very successful one for Mantic. I think it's sold very well, so that's great.
It looks like it's so far. The only concern that I have is that for now, Mantic is kind of like this company that does Kings of War and other stuff. And at what point do they become the company that does Halo and other stuff?
Right. Although
But
that
that's
is,
kind of
that
selfish.
is assuming it's going to be very, very, very successful. But yeah, it would be interesting to see, Clem. Yeah.
I think, didn't they say they sold out their first manufacturing batch already?
Yes.
So I think they're already kind of so big because they thought,
Yes.
oh, it's Halo, we just will be doing okay. And yet they still sold this out. So I think it's a pretty good sign. And that's before people could actually even play it. And we all know here that it is Dead Zone and it's an excellent game. So I think once people start to play it, they will actually love it and bring in more friends. So I expect this to be very, very successful. So again, very selfishly for me, it's like, oh, I hope they still do Kings of War stuff and other stuff that I play. But yeah, it's a good problem to have, I think.
For sure. I think as you mentioned, the first print run has been sold out. So they're actually making a second print run for early next year. So even if you can't get it in November, you'll probably get it by after Christmas. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it as well. Locally, we have a few games conventions that we are running in late October that hopefully we can get the game in. And I think it doesn't take much to. I mean, for the demo wise, it comes with pre-printed terrain that really helps. It's easy to assemble terrain, and the minis, they come different colors. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Halo. I think don't worry, Clem. I think more Halo sold means more money earned by Mantic, which means more money for Kings of War. So it all comes together.
And speaking of which, Clem, obviously we've seen as well new Abyssal models. As an Abyssal player, what do you think of them?
So I like them. I'm still a bit disappointed that I did not get new Abyssal Horsemen. I was betting on them because I really think style-wise the Abyssals are great, and they could have done a really awesome-looking cavalry kits. I like the existing ones, as they are just a bit older and a bit harder to assemble and so on. And so when I get a new player into the game, I don't really want to throw a box like a regiment of the older Abyssal Horsemen onto them. Like it's a bit less appealing. So that was kind of my initial disappointment, so to speak. At the same time, I think it's pretty cool that they brought completely new units into it that look really cool. I think the big snakes, rule-wise, I have the impression that they could have been just one aura, like one titan, one monster that basically provides the aura that they do, and keep the snakes as like an actually fighting unit. Because I think my worry when I see these rules is I'm not sure I would take two of these units unless you really very, very heavily rely on the aura for your whole army. But I'm not so sure. And so making a plastic kit that most players will want to have one of sounds kind of like, is that really the best thing that could happen?
Sorry, Clem, do you want to tell us what the aura does?
The big snakes, I think there were tons of previews for it, right? Like the chariot unit, they only exist in regiment size, so 150 by 100.
Yes.
And they have an aura that is a brand new type of aura, it's unique in the game. It brings units with regeneration to +1, is it? Or to 4+ directly? I don't remember.
It brings them to 4+.
And so in a Forces of the Abyss army, this is massive, right? Like if you have two hordes of or two regiments of cavalry with regeneration 5 up, and suddenly these guys get to 4+, that's really nice. Like I definitely want to try to bring this supports in the army. Arguably, the Force of the Abyss could already do a bunch of heal, right, with the Well of Souls. Exactly. I mean, they already had some tools, but this is a new one that is pretty cool. My concern is more because the unit in itself, like the number of attacks, is reasonably low. I don't remember exactly the stats, and it's no point in going through every number. But my impression was, I definitely want to have one of these in my army. 2 is probably paying a bit too much. and therefore having a plastic kit for this is they're really nice looking models, but I hope they will sell enough of them to be happy of what they did with this one. The Berserkers, there's no question, right? Like they're kind of a cavalry role, very fast, nimble, regen, but hit on the 4+, so it's not like they can do everything, right? Like they can do a lot of things really nicely, but they also come with some challenges.
Sure.
So that part is nice. The model also I quite like. There's a hero that really looks nice, and so I can definitely see people, and that maybe includes me, who will take two units of these plus the hero, or even more than this. Like, you could build the Force of the Abyss around cavalry before, or Molochs. I think Berserkers are now just up there as well in your new options, and that's pretty cool. And so I think it will also do well in terms of sales. But the snakes, I'm just a bit more worried. Speaking of the Abyssals, I don't remember exactly what happened, and I will just leave the surprise to the listener. I remember when I saw the Cronias, I thought, ooh, I definitely want to buy a second one of those. So I don't remember what changed with them, but I remember it changed in a good direction. So if you have a Cronius like me that isn't painted yet, you should get back to it. This is the only thing that I remember from reading it, and yeah.
And guys, what have we seen teased for the? Are we saying Basilians? Have we? Does it matter?
We say neither of them.
Basilia.
There was a bit of Clash of Kings happened, right? And some talk but there was an episode about it, so you guys should go listen to the episode about it.
They stolen your horses, Clem.
Yes. I still like the darker version of them, so the Basilia. Not so sure I will make them.
Could you not just paint them up to look all evilly? I mean, dudes in armor. Could you not just make them look evilly and call it a day?
Maybe. No, you're right. I could, swap the heads with the lower abyssal head, and suddenly they, no, that's an idea. Maybe.
I don't know how accurate it is, but I heard that people were asking, and the Basilia reveal could also be a Abyssal Horseman. I think they could use the same horse and have a different rider.
Yeah. Or as Clem said, just swap a head. I mean, you can, to be honest, you can get away with an awful lot with the paint scheme, can't you? If you just use evil colours, boom.
If you're good at it, yes.
Yep.
Paint it black, and then it works.
Fantastic. So come on, guys, should we move on to Kings of War?
Sure.
Has anyone done any Kings of War lately?
I mean, for my side, it's more of demo games. We have some new players coming in as well. So doing more.
What's driving that, Gad? That sounds very positive. What's driving that, Gad? Are these players from other games, or are these brand new players, or?
So quite interestingly, like for example, one of them is an old player coming back. I mean, he saw the old world, but he also saw that we have a pretty active Kings of War scene. So he's like, why not? Why don't I play both? So he's playing both games because he sees that he's tried both games. So he's interested in both. So it's something like another game can bring someone to Kings of War as well. If something brings back them to the hobby, it's a chance for people to try the game. And he has tried it. He likes it. He's been asking us questions about it. Yeah, and seems quite excited for it for sure.
Fantastic. Gad, while we're talking about your Singapore community, I think we just have to, on a sort of somber note, we have to just mention that you lost a member of the community recently. I just wanted to give us a chance maybe to give a little moment of silence for your local friend who passed.
Yes, thank you, Chris.
Super. Right, back to the episode, guys. Gerry,
Yes. I've been coaching, shall we say, / forcing people into playing Kings of War for a little while now. And occasionally I get community members from on tabletop who aren't local to me, who want to try it out. So I've actually been playing with a guy in Scotland for the last couple of months. We play once a month using Universal Battle. So I actually played 2 weeks ago. As a last hurrah for the Abyssals, I rolled out a force against him. It's been interesting playing Orinoco because he's been just tailoring and trying to learn his Sylvan Kin list. So every month he plays the same list that I initially tweaked for me. He came to me and went, here's a 2,000 point list I want to play. And say, okay, well, what about if you do this and this and maybe change that? So he's been running that for a while. And in the background, he's been building and painting. And then every time we play, I just take something totally different. Because it gives me a chance to just play around, because I have most of the armies except Dry Undead, which are the worst undead. I hate it. It's coarse, sand gets everywhere. A great man said that once. But it gives him an opportunity to play against a whole host of armies and see how he fares with his Sylvan Kin against them. So he's played against halflings, he's played against Basilean, actually. Then my Filth Force of Nature army, which has got far too many tree men and the Wilt Daddy, which a friend in real life absolutely hates. So yeah, we played a 2,000 point Smoke and Mirrors game using the Abyssal list as was before it goes away, and I had a lot of fun with that. I really it's nice to be able to reach out and touch people through Universal Battles. Obviously it got used an awful lot during the event, which people don't talk about anymore, but because I wouldn't say influence, but they hear me talking about Kings and some other games on a semi-regular basis. So it's nice for somebody to go, oh, I really fancy playing that, or seeing what it's like, or I've heard it's good, but there's nobody in my area to teach me. And then you just go, well, I can. And then we can all sit down and have a laugh doing it. And I actually won for once, which is unusual for me. I'd like to say it was through skill and tactics, because normally I'm coaching him as well, going, well, you could do that, but if you reform in the other direction, then you can have me in the flank next turn if I don't break you, and so on and so forth. So half the time I'm playing against him, plus a bit of advice myself. This time round I won because he rolled double ones at inconvenient moment for him, which is great.
Perfect.
And what everybody wants to see.
You planned that perfectly. You knew that double one was coming.
Lured him in to 3 double ones. And I had a double 6 waiver on him on turn 2 as well, which really, it was just beautiful.
Hashtag UB Dice.
Yeah, that's right. Fantastic. Super.
This is Max McDougall saying, so much universe, so little time.
And Gad, what about you, buddy?
Yeah,
You've been running demos.
Running demos. There is our local tournament coming up in next month in October.
Any seats left? Do you want to give us a plug?
It's pretty much full. We actually changed from a 2-day to a 1-day, but we're making a team event. So team events are quite fun. So we have 4 teams of 4. So I think for 1 day it'll be our most players we ever had locally, at least in Singapore, because typically our store only can fit 8 to 10 people. So this one we are having at the store's annual game convention called Hammerfest. So that's a bigger space. So there's other game systems as well. So that's good for the game in terms of exposure. So we have 4 teams of 4. So it'll be like we just assign who will play at different tables with different scenarios and different terrain. So that's going to be fun.
How have you picked the teams, Gad? Have you done it by faction or just form a team with your friends kind of thing?
So what we did is initially when we started this, there were newer players that they didn't want to join. They didn't want to be a burden to their teams. They didn't want to let their teams down. So which was a bit discouraging. But what we did was we chose the 4 newest players. So the 4 newer players were captains of the team. So they had the ability to choose teammates. Yeah. So they chose players that they feel could work well together with them. So
it's a really nice way of doing it and involving the newer players. I really love that, Gad. That's great.
Yeah. So yeah, we are interested in that. I'm still struggling with my reforged orcs. Still trying to get them painted for the tournament, but it works. I always get my armies painted before a tournament, even if it takes the night before. So
perfect. Gerry.
Yeah, I was just wondering, for the team event, are you introducing anything in particular to it? Or is it just going to be sort of the combined scores of the teams?
Yeah, it's combined scores of the team. There is an element of which player goes to which table. So depending on the scenario, so every round everybody plays a different scenario. So it's a bit interesting in that sense. So certain armies are probably more suited for certain scenarios, and it's a guess game, because the other team would also be thinking of the same, and each team will be able to play each other once, because there's 4 teams, so you'll play each team once. So
yes. It's a little bit similar to how the ETC used to do the team event, where you'd know the scenario, you'd know your team opponent, and then you would have to find the best matchups within it. It's a really fun way of doing things, and gets everybody involved in talking about who they want to face plant against. And sometimes you have to take the tactical foul, so to speak. You know somebody is just going to get creamed, and you're just thinking, you just go out there and you sit at that board edge and you try your best. So
yes, for sure.
Take one for the team. Fantastic. Oh, that sounds amazing, buddy. It's so nice to hear that your communities, I mean, I know you're putting a lot of hard work in, but it's paying off, isn't it? You're seeing the results. That's amazing. Great. Clem, what about you, buddy? Have you played any Kings of War since the last pod?
I have not played Kings of War so recently, but I've been starting to think about which army I'm going to play in 25. Well, what I have done also, and I've been naughty, I've played my first game of the old world. So should we digress a little bit?
Sure.
It took me 3.5 hours to play 1,000 points something.
Not bad going, is it?
No, it's actually, it went okay. So the good thing is I played with someone I knew before, and I know he's a great guy and is a veteran fantasy player and so on. So he knew the rules a lot better than me, obviously. It's always interesting to see something different and new. I'm still trying to digest this a little bit. I think there are like core fundamental issues in the rule system that make it not so interesting to me. Like infantry is basically just bad, and charging someone in the flank doesn't really make that big of a difference. It brings a little bit, but it's not.
Removes ranks for combat bonus.
Well, if they have no combat bonus at all, because it's a cavalry unit, then you don't get much, right? Like you just get a tiny bit. It's not similar. I mean, it's a game of movement, obviously, as well. But so far, from a very limited and poor understanding of the rules, it's mostly about I need to charge first. And if you charge first, then it means it will go well for you, because most likely you will break your opponent, and then they will flee a little bit, and then you will charge them again the turn after. And when you charge and you wipe out the front rank of models, they cannot fight back. So it's like over and over and over, and you just push them back.
Sounds more like a historical game, I would say.
I mean, if they've taken some elements, from what I understand, from the Warhammer Army project or whatever it was, and some other things. It's not necessarily bad. It's just I don't understand how you play it intensively or like to a very higher level. It feels like to me it's more a good excuse to put different models on the table. Maybe play other people. Maybe. The one thing that I kind of think is more interesting is how the war engines function. Because it's still very random, right? Like you could, if you approach it from a competitive point of view, more randomness is not so good. But as a casual player, I find it funny when you have a catapult that just scatters somewhere else and hits your own unit or something. So I don't know. Gerry, you want to jump in and comment on this?
Yeah, well, I was an absolute demon at cannons and catapults for years. So much so that even though you can't pick characters out of units, you can with a cannon. and I got very good and very accurate at guessing. So it all comes down to how good people are at guessing, and knowing that, assuming it still uses the artillery dice, that your average on those artillery dice is going to be 8.5 inches. So you need to account for that, guess slightly short, and then power it straight through the captain's head and hope they feel the lookout, sir.
So you're sniping someone with a cannon.
Oh, yeah, it was horrible. I was a filth merchant. Did they keep in the last rule set in 8th edition, which is the last one I played, they added random charge, 2d6 plus for your charge distance. Did they keep that for the old world? Because that was horrible.
Indirectly, yes. So I think there are subtleties, but if I remember correctly, the charge is your normal movement plus 1d6, which is the highest of 2d6 that you roll. And then obviously, because it's a Games Workshop rules, there are tons of variants of this and exceptions and unique things on top of it. But the idea is always you declare the charges, you declare all of the charges, which is always the thing that gets a fantasy player when they come to Kings of War. Declare all the charges and then the charge reaction and then roll for it. And you may fail the charge and then just move forward like an idiot and be exposed for next round.
Get shot in the face.
Yeah. But so ultimately how the game went was, so it was interesting to play, but my infantry was completely useless. So I played full Demons of Corinth because why not? That's what I had as well. And my big guys on Juggernauts, like the heaviest cavalry almost you could imagine, they just spend the whole game running forward and destroying things on impact, and then going to destroy the next thing on impact, and then the next thing, and then it was the end of the game. So, okay. Again, an interesting experience, but it is, something different. To get back to what it teaches me about Kings of War, though, is, again, scenarios really make a big difference, because there the scenario is just kill more points than your opponent. Mostly, right? Or you can occupy one objective in the center and gives you 100 points versus if you kill stuff, you gain 2,000 points. So it's really minor. And war engines sound funnier in the old world. And Chris.
So Gerry, back in April, I had the hilarious idea that I was going to do an April Fool's joke on the pod that we were going to become an old world podcast. And Clem and Mark said, definitely don't do that. It's sort of like best case scenario, you raise a mild chuckle. Worst case scenario, everyone gets angry. So don't do that. So yes, but there we go, Clem. But you had a fun time with the old world, is what you're saying.
It was an interesting experience. I'm not saying I will never ever play it again, but I definitely can understand why people who thought, oh, this is so great, I'm going to play the old world and now maybe come back to play Kings of War. Because, it took us 3.5 hours. Okay, it's the first game, so we had to still look up. For me, it was the first game, not for him. So we still had to look up a few rules here and there. But it's just interesting to see a different gaming experience for something that on paper is supposed to be the same game, right? It's a rank and flank, it's fantasy, blah, 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 blah. And yet they are so different. Like the actual experience that you have when you play them is so different. So I just wanted to mention it.
Yeah, definitely, buddy. It was interesting. When I went up, I made a map shorts on it. I went up to see the Privateer Poser Boys, and we chatted about it. And there's a good number of players that were playing Kings of War just dropped off for the old world when that was coming back. I know they played that, they enjoy playing that, but they're coming back to Kings of War. It's sort of like the excitement has passed, and they're like, yeah, it's a good game, but Kings of War is also a good game. Gerry.
It's funny you mentioned about playing with different models, Clem, because one of the things that I noticed, and I think most people did if they played any significant amount of tournaments or campaigns with Warhammer, and the old world will be no different, is net lists are very much a thing, far more than they are in Kings of War. The balancing done by the ETC they tried their best for years, but it was never going to fix. The Swedish comp could never fix the inherent problems, and you knew if you took the field and your opponent had vampire counts, you knew there was a blood dragon vampire and he had the Hydra blade and he'd be sitting in that unit over there and you could just see him, and then he got shot in the face with 3 cannonballs, but you knew he was on the table. Whereas Kings of War, I think that people don't realize the diversity of lists that you're capable of fielding in Kings is so much bigger than Warhammer. Even though on paper they may look like they've got equivalent amounts of heroes and artillery and infantry and cavalry, one is fieldable in any form and function with Kings, and in Warhammer / the Old World, you were almost you were putting yourself on the back foot by taking anything except the accepted net lists. So I find that amusing.
No, that's a fair point. I think what I said with different models is back in the old days, I loved to collect the Warriors of Chaos and Corn Demons. And these two, when you translate into Kings of War, you could force them into Force of the Abyss and Varangur, but it's kind of something different. And so I've never really done that. And so for me, it was mostly I enjoy painting the models. Might as well try them to put them on the table once. And I could do it for Kings of War as well, but it kind of feels wrong. Like I have other things I want to play in Kings of War. So for these models, they're definitely more like Warriors of Chaos army. It's not a Varangur army. You know what I mean? And therefore, if I ever want to give them a ride one day, I'll do it with the other system and do it once, and that's it. You know?
Yeah, maybe I can chime in a bit there. I haven't really played the Oval, but I'm in the local Oval group. So I'm just lurking there, looking at their games. So a lot of games seem to be, I found this combination that's so strong. You know, it's difficult for your army to deal with it. Or I think characters on dragons are pretty strong in the Oval for some reason now, because they can get ward save, regeneration save, good armor, and they can hold up a lot of the army. But as Clem said, it's a lot of kill. There's not a lot of terrain. They seem to prefer battlefields with no terrain in the middle or one terrain in the middle. And they just
terrain has almost no impact on the game. Like the rules to interact with terrain are very simple, very limited, which is also almost weird coming from Kings of War.
Yeah, terrain is a huge part of the game, heights and terrain and how you work around that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just slowly I'm not trying to bring people over so blatantly, because the main person pushing Kings of War used to be from Singapore, but he moved to Hong Kong. So he's like sharing games in Hong Kong. We have some games in Singapore. So, but we do have times where we have games of Oval and Kings of War happening at the same time in our local game store. So hopefully they will take notice and maybe give us a try.
I'm 100% in favor of having, during gaming days, both systems, like more systems next to each other. I think it makes sense, because ultimately most of the people that I see locally play the Old World are people who like this type of games, and people are enjoyable people and so on. And so I want to, spend time with them, and like that they spend time with the Kings of War player. And then people can, have a look across. But it's not even to try to hire new players. It's just, I feel like we're ultimately doing the same thing. We love playing with toy soldiers, with big armies on the table. Just come and meet up at the same time. And it's a different philosophy of it, but still worth it.
Yep. And Chris, I think we lost you. So, yeah, Chris is facing technical issues at the moment. But, yeah, I agree, Clem. I think, as you said, we all love pushing toy soldiers. And yes, Gerry, I was part of the ETCC locally. We did send a team from Singapore, ETC. And interestingly enough, some of them have come back to Kings of War, actually. A few people that used to travel, because we had an event in Malaysia for Kings of War earlier this year. And the people who used to play ETC, they like to travel. So they're actually looking forward to that one next year. And also traveling to Clash. We have 9 people who are interested in coming to Clash of Kings in UK next year, which is fantastic. That'll be
crazy. Means we need to buy tickets the second they come out now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I could always force Steve to give me some tickets, but we'll see. Because there's always dropouts. Like this year they had like 10 dropouts, something like that. So
Well, one of the things I really like to see about people playing in a club with multiple systems side by side is you're not living in a vacuum then. And sometimes there's an idea that, that club only plays ... And that's because other people won't go in. And if they don't go in, then nobody gets to see other things. And it's bad for It's bad for everybody's hobby because nobody gets exposed to new.
Thought it was funny, but
Yep.
Nice.
But yeah. Otherwise, Kings of War. On the topic of Kings of War for me is there's a gaming day with a weird guy in Frankfurt, I think next weekend. So I'm very much looking forward to this game with my goblins. And the weekend after, I'm also doing a small local gaming day here. We'll do multi-systems, a bunch of ambush, a bunch of new players coming in. I'll bring a few extra armies as well because some people say they would just drop by to have a look. And the spirit is hopefully the have a look transforms into here. There's an army already deployed, just play it. And that's how it starts. And I think for me the big question these days in Kings of War is what is my 2025 army? So have you guys thought about any of this, and should we talk about it now?
Big time, Clem. Big time. Excited to do so. Yes.
Go ahead then.
Yes. So, yes, after Clash of Kings. So, by the way, guys, I went to Clash of Kings and it was amazing. It was really, 11 out of 10 kind of stuff. Had a wonderful time, amazing people, fun games. Yeah, brilliant time. I did my classic 1-2 games, lost 4, which, for me is about right. But I played against very, very good players, so I was very happy to scrape those 2 wins. And it just so happened those 2 wins were against Tom and also the pod editor Fred. So as Fred puts it, I get to remain pod alpha, which is obviously very me. So that was good fun. And Tom started calling me King Mup, which as a proud Irishman, I'm not sure whether it's a compliment, but I'll, whatever it is, I'm into it anyway. So, yes, so the Northern Alliance, we went on our quest. There's going to be an episode of Mup Stories coming out soon, dear listener, when after Walt's had his much-deserved holiday. So you'll hear what happened to the narrative of our saga to save the Northern Alliance. And just thinking about that and, what happened in our adventure, my friend Chris and I were talking about it and we're thinking, well, yeah, we quite fancy Trident Realm. I gave him a long list of options. I was pushing Abyss, Forces of the Abyss, because of the beautiful new models. Like, come on, let's go and be the bad guys. But Chris fancies weirdo undersea men, which I'm me. It's one of my true loves. So I'm very happy to go back to the Trident Realm. But like my Northern Alliance last year, I have an army, but I kind of want to do it again, if that makes sense. So I'm going to repaint stuff, remake the bases. So it is basically going to be a new army, and also a lot of my stuff now is Hadros from Wrath of Kings, so a lot of it is non-Mantic models. I've got some super cool kind of shark gladiators, but they're not Mantic, and I kind of want to take an all-Mantic army. So so it's a chance to kind of look at the army afresh. Obviously things have changed a bit, but I'm super looking forward to it. So we're doing Trident Realm, and our story, we're from the Frozen Sea. I mean, I wanted to do it anyway because my Northern Lights have some ice naiads in there. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we were allies with the local
cousins?
Yes, exactly. So there was, I wanted there to be kind of a reason for that. So yes, super looking forward to playing Trident Realm this year. This weekend I made 9 new bases. So got cracking with that. I'm using exactly the same idea as because they're from the Frozen Sea, so icy bases. That makes sense, right? I didn't have to think of a new idea or anything crazy.
Don't change the working recipe, right?
Exactly. It's fun to do. It looks nice. Stick with it. And I've just been, emptying boxes and having a look to see what models I've got. I've also got a few kind of Mantic sci-fi models, and I've got some Hellboy models as well that would fit really well. So I think it's going to be all Mantic, and I'm just looking forward to it. It's just as a new, going back to an old army, but treating it kind of as a new, with fresh eyes, if that makes sense. So super enthusiastic.
It's like a new girlfriend that you already know, right? It's just get back to a classic.
Yes, good. And I think I mentioned it already. I want to do placoderms. and I'm using Mantic salamander models, which I just so happen to have tons of, right, Clem? Because we did a salamander army a year or so
I think
ago.
it's a great idea.
So
I think
fits.
it really
fits,
works well.
Painted my first test model, happy with it. Give it 2 weeks, buddy. I'll be finished. No worries. I'm really into it. I'm getting pretty obsessed about it, to be honest. So, yeah. So, I don't think it'll be ready for this weekend, but not too far away. And maybe I've got a very busy, although it's only a 3-day week for me, it's going to be a very busy 3-day week. So there should be a gaming day on Tuesday at Quest Hub. I'd love to make it, and I will pack my models, but whether I actually do or not is another thing. So we'll have to see how it goes.
We're going again on Friday anyway, right?
We're going again on Friday. And yes, and obviously this weekend, Clem and some of my very, very close friends are, for example, Trent, are coming this weekend, and we're just going to play some great games and eat some nice food and laugh at each other's misfortune and watch the classic Event Horizon. So yeah, I'm super excited. It's going to be great. And and Clem, we had a very nice yesterday. We had a lovely email from a listener who is an English expat living in Frankfurt, and he can't make it this Tuesday, but he's going to come along. And Clem, I'm starting to suspect it might be you in disguise, but he said, and I play Kings of War, but I only play 10 mil. So we're lending him an army.
Person of taste, what can I say?
We're lending him an army, so at some point he'll make it up, and he seems sounds really positive. So so what's going on?
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean,
cool.
I haven't decided yet for 25 what I'm going to bring. The Trident Realm for me is a bit of a challenging army, because that's not something I really had in mind that I would do, but I could see myself maybe just get some frogs and throw them on the table and see how it goes. But at the same time, Clash is a big thing, like you travel a bit, then you play 6 games, and so you have to do it with something that you deep down really are happy with, I think. Yes, Chris.
Yeah. I mean, what I was thinking, buddy, is maybe get an ambush box and see how you go. But I know, Clem, I know you want to come and join the team, but your heart's just not in it. Hey, Gerry, by the way, do you fancy doing a Trident Realm army and coming to Clash and joining the team? Well, just to put it into perspective, I think last time there were about 40 teams and we finished 35th. So, right up, I mean, really right up there.
I'd be worried about nerfing your results in that respect. I love the idea of it, though. And weirdly, like you, I also have a Trident Realm army that is built around the Hadros from Wrath of Kings. It may need to get a refresh in some way. Shockingly, I haven't bought any of the little froggies yet from Mantic. It was the first set I'd skipped because I wasn't. Oh, it's not that I wasn't interested in them. It's just I knew I wasn't going to be touching Trident Realms this year. So for once, I didn't just go send me all of them immediately, which is generally what I do. Coral Giant, is that? Coral Giant. Yeah.
Yes, shout out.
I would love to. Thank you very much for the invite. I will have to see if I can make this thing happen. But since I'm the one that authorizes the holidays,
it's not just to this podcast is not legally binding. So
I mean, Chris, I just had an idea. If you're the team Froggies, it means I have to be the team baddies. Like I have to take Abyssals and come kick your butts, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, this is the next step of what I wanted to do, because I wanted to open it up to the dear listener and start putting people in, if we've got 4 Abyssal players coming, make a team and we'll write it into the story. That's kind of the next I haven't spoken to Walt about this, and he's writing the lore. Hi Walt. But this was basically my idea, to take it that one step further of, because how cool would it be? I mean, MUP listeners, for the most part, I think are pretty cool people, and we're not that bothered about winning or not. But how cool would it be if we got to game 6 and it really mattered how we did, just to see how the story went? Are we closing up the rift, or what's going to happen? You're going to destroy our undersea city,
Our own private narrative event within an event.
Exactly,
And
Gerry.
that sounds-
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think you sold it to me. I have to figure out what I do with my Abyssals, because the problem is that they are my first Kings of War army. And stupidly, I thought when I started making them, so I started them with Vanguard, right? So they were based individually. And I thought, well, it's a big thing. Like, I'll do a whole army of them, and maybe I will play those models in other systems. You never know. And I'll individually base them and then put them on trays and so on. So that's what I did. And then I never, ever took them out of those trays. Like, I've never played them outside of Kings of War, because why would I? And so now I have this not multi-based Force of the Abyss army. And I don't feel like rebasing it. It's like such a pain to rebase something. But at the same time, I don't feel like adding to it individually based. So,
I mean, I did this last year with the Northern Alliance army. I rebased the whole thing and I repainted the whole thing. And I get a lot more enjoyment out of it now than I did before I did it, because I'm really happy with how it looks now. And actually, it's quite an interesting exercise. So I'm pretty much doing the same thing with my Trident Realm. I'm picking models off of bases, spinning the bases, and just, I'm doing a totally different paint scheme with my Naiads. I've started repainting my Heart Piercers. I'm doing it completely fresh so that I'm happy with it now, not happy with it, 4 years ago when I painted it the first time in a hurry, Yeah, it's quite an interesting exercise.
I mean, one thing also that could happen is if I just build the list differently, I might just get different models that I don't already have, and therefore
actually the newer models for sure. Newer models for sure. Yeah, I think for me, I have a Trident Realm army. I don't think I shared with the MUP crew. It's actually in a lock. It's like in a treasure trash. So it's like you open the chest, the whole army is there. I brought it to Clash of Kings Asia earlier this year, so I'm looking at expanding it. I'm really excited about the Trident King. I'm not sure if you guys talked about the Trident King during the episode. Yeah, so I'm really excited
we
about...
talked about his auras. He's quite a lot of points, but his 3 auras giving elite to the Royal Guard or
he got a point drop.
Naiads.
He got a point drop, so the auras are almost free. Yeah, so that's interesting. But it's a pity they don't have a model, but I have some ideas of how I could use Mantic models to do like a chariot with Naiad on top. So that's something I'm looking forward to adding to my army. Just that fitting it all into onto the same chest would be a challenge. But we'll see.
You might get a big display chest, but that sounds amazing there. Cool. But I find the playstyle of the Trident Realm so interesting because it's so weird, which is exactly how it should be, because we were under the sea weirdos. I mean, it makes perfect sense. And it's hard to do wounds, but we're so flipping slippery. It's a totally different army. So I'm super looking forward to playing it. And it's when things go wrong, they go really, really wrong. So of course they're going to go wrong more often than not, right? But yeah, I'm super excited. It's going to be great fun, and we're going to have a great time. And Chris has a fish that, like a soft toy fish that has a surprising amount of personality, and we do the voice and everything. And so all of this together is just going to be a brilliant week.
We'll burn all of this.
Don't judge me, Gad. We play toy soldiers for a hobby. Come on.
We'll burn all of it.
So we can have a brilliant time.
Into the abyss.
Hey everybody, this is Mike Rossi, Wingdissar's second best dwarf author, and you're listening to the Mantic Universe podcast.
I think we can be pretty quick with the Mantic sci-fi this month, unless anyone's going to shock me. Has anyone played any Dead Zone or Warpath?
I did, yes. I actually played some Dead Zone. Yes, there's a big movement locally. Apparently people somehow got into it. Like, we hired 2 new players just last Friday. There's a big move locally, and it's nice. Like, I hadn't played Dead Zone in a long time, and so it's always a pleasure to get back to it. And it's also interesting because when you introduce the game to someone new, it's you realize again how easy it is as a game, and like how nicely done it is to bring new people. And I really enjoyed it. And and I've started also to assemble some Night Stalkers to play in Firefighting Dead Zone. So there's a few things going on, and we'll talk more about it later after the next gaming session. But some stuff happens on sci-fi as well. And that's it. We can move on. Unless Gerry, you had something.
Well, I played a couple of games yesterday for the Edge of Insanity campaign. So if people aren't aware, I imagine they are, Summer of Sci-Fi, the big Edge of Insanity campaign, it's Firefight and Dead Zone. And coupled with that, a couple of weeks ago, Mantic decided to do a My Mini Factory. They call it a campaign or a funder type thing where you can get a load of Dead Zone STLs. So I looked through that and they'd pre-constructed lists. So if you're a new player and you were just getting into it and you do the 3D printing type of thing, you could get one of 6 different strike teams for Dead Zone. And they are set. They're set to 100-point list. Great for new players because you don't have to worry about choices. You can just go, oh, I'll just take that. That looks fun. And that has whatever's in it. So it removes the analysis paralysis of a new game and having to think about what is good and what is bad. And I realized that nearly every STL in there belongs to a existing Mantic board game. So Star Saga obviously was a ton of stuff, but there's also bits and pieces from Dreadball Extreme. And I went, well, I can put together 3 of those. So I did, because I thought it'd be fun to find out what they played like. And then I also realized I could make the filth list that it's one of the public lists by 777 Family of Gamers. It has a Maison Labs list with 2 plague aberrations in it. And Krasnor, again, another Dreadball figure. So it was like, well, I'll just have all of those. So myself and my friend Paul, who is my Kings of War / Mantic buddy, we play all the Mantic games all the time whenever we get together. We went up yesterday, played a couple of games, played the Maison Labs against Shock and Awe, which is the over-the-top Vermin force, and then we played GCPS against the Eros contract, which are all the heroes from Star Saga, and they are filthy. Oh, it's terrible. Oh, we had so much fun with that. Well, I had so much fun with that, Paul, less so. But if you have Star Saga and you have Dead Zone, you should run these out at some point just for novelty value, because they are good fun, especially the special, the command activation for the Eris contract, the special faction action for your command is plot armor. So when one of your guys dies, if somebody else can run over to them, they can heal them up and they get back up again and go, they're not really dead because they are heroes, and then they just tear on. So the way things panned out, we ended up with 1 victory for the Vermin and 1 victory against the Vermin, because he played 1 first against my Eros, and the Eris contract guys just wiped them, and then I played Shock and Awe against the 777 aberration filth list of Maison Labs, and oh my god, I have to say, aberrations are terrible. I know they're terrible, but then having that Psychic Kovar give them another activation by just removing their action and then just go again, and all of a sudden the Thunder Gorilla was just rampaging through my force, slamming little rat dudes into walls left, right and centre.
That sounds pretty filthy. Yeah.
Oh, it's
brutal.
Brutal and Brutal Deluxe, I think, are the 2 names of those models. But yeah, so we made no difference to the campaign because we put 1 victory in and then took 1 victory away from the Vermin. So everything, we have no effect on anything. But yeah, it's good fun to do nonetheless.
Sounds awesome, though.
Yeah, I really, really need to play more Dead Zone. It's such a fantastic game. I don't know. And it's, what were you playing, Gerry? We playing 150 points.
Well, those are pre-constructed 200-point lists. So they're just set. You
200. Yeah. Amazing. Fantastic.
A lot of fun.
Super. Maybe we'll get some this weekend. Fantastic.
Yeah,
super, guys. And unfortunately,
for you, Chris, it makes sense to stick to Kings of War for a while. But I think you're pretty soon you can also do some Dead Zone as well, because as we all know, Dead Zone is very easy to get into, right? It's not something. It's nowhere near the investments that you put into a Kings of War army. So you can very easily just have a starter or even just borrow a team for 1 evening. And in 1 evening, if you've never ever played Dead Zone, your first game is a demo, you learn the rules. And then the second game, you just go for it and have a great time. And the third game in the same evening, same thing. Like It's so easy to pick up that I think you can reasonably bring it into your gaming group without bringing too much impression of, oh, we drop Kings of War now and play this instead. It could be just, like a slightly different taste every now and then. And
a cleanser.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah. Amazing. Fantastic. Yeah, it's a fantastic game. Super, guys. Should we move on to some listener questions?
Yes, we can maybe mention no Panilor today because Mark recorded Panilor as a separate episode earlier today. So this will come out before or after this episode at some point. So Panilor is separated for this today because they've took an hour and a half instead of a smaller segment as they thought initially. And so it will be a separate episode. And yes, otherwise listener questions.
Yeah, thanks, Clem. And thanks, Mark. Fantastic. So we have a question from Gordon Innes, I'm going to say. With Abyssal Army revamp in COC 25, what armies do you think will get a refresh next year? I would like to ask a similar question, but based on fluff, which faction is most in need of a refresh? The second part I think is very interesting. Guys, I think we've seen some sort of Basilian stuff teased, although I'm probably saying that wrong. And I think Ronnie kind of hinted it would be Basilia coming soon. So I think probably Basilia and then probably +1 or +2 next year.
Well, I think, normally in 25 there should be 2 armies, right? But there's an interesting question as well is 25 in theory is also 4th edition year. So to me, means if they are actually indeed doing the Basilians sometime as the first army in 25, so like they've done the Trident Realm in 24, the second army will be the 4th edition launch army. So to me, it has to be a good opponent to the Basilians. So what is the poster boy enemy of Basilia? And we would need some new models.
Until Abyss was in this release with Trident Realm, I would have said it would have been great, to be honest, if it was Forces of the Abyss, because I feel like that's a really classic matchup. The Holy Knights versus the Demons. I always enjoy that. Okay, Dead Air. Let's take a wild stab. I don't think it'll be Night Stalkers because I think they've seen too much stuff recently. Could it be the Undead?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be some of the classical stuff because when you do a new edition, you want to go something big that has wide appeal. And so Abyssal Dwarfs, I feel, are like there's a specific twist on them from Mantic, so that would be pretty cool. Except they've got some love recently, and I'm not sure if lore-wise it makes sense to have Abyssal Dwarfs versus Basilia. But that could be a candidate, like as a good Mantic army and to expand. And the other baddies that I can think of, Undead is a huge classic thing. I have no idea what they could do to add to the range, like which models to redo or new stuff to add to the range. It's an interesting question, but otherwise you're right. Like Basilia against Undead sounds like a classic as well.
Yeah, Undead is an interesting one because the models are super old, but they're also actually really good. For their age, they're absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I still think it's interesting that Mantic haven't updated elves because I still think there's space for it. But
if you don't think of it, sorry to interrupt, but if you don't think of it with the opposing Basilia against something else for the 4th edition starter, then I agree with you. Elves sound like a very good contender, especially because we've seen some skulls for League of Infamy already that were pretty nice, I think.
Exactly.
Some dwarves maybe, although I think I like the dwarves like as they are right now. They could get an expansion. It's another classic army like dwarves, and so how they call the guys that ride on the big rats or whatever in the dwarves. The Brock Rider, yes. These guys in plastic would be pretty cool, I think. Something similar to this. But it doesn't really work as a opposing faction for 4th edition starter.
I sort of agree with you, but also why not? Why not have humans against dwarves? It doesn't always have to be good versus evil, does it? You know, we've got neutral. I know we don't particularly like that, but
No,
do
that's
something.
fair.
Why not?
No, but I'm trying to also understand what the
Golix,
story behind.
Golix, yeah, well, I mean, Golix is, is being talked to by a demon or influenced by the Abyss. So, it could make sense that the Abyss is chucking the dwarves at the Basilians,
Right, so there's an actual, some Basilians actually uncover the fact that Golix is Abyssal's puppet, and then there's an actual campaign against him or some sort of a war or something. It could make sense also from the first perspective. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, it might feel weird if you're the dwarf player, though, because you think, we're the good dwarves. Oh, no, we're a tool of evil. Oh, no.
Yeah,
The only good dwarves are in the hills. The free dwarves are the good. Anybody with an Imperial dwarf army, you know that you're absolute filth and evil.
It's like the meme, are we the bad guys? It's like we're the Imperial March and so on and so forth, all the skulls everywhere. Are we the bad guys? Yeah. I mean, another candidate, which we thought might have been the third army for 24, right, was the Herd and Forces of Nature and Order of the Green Lady, like this big aura of stuff.
It could use a refresh as well, to be honest, couldn't it?
Yeah,
it's got tons of unit entries. Could use a clear up as well.
Yeah, a bit of a refresh and regroup. I'm not saying to get rid of stuff, but I feel like nature, Forces of Nature, Order of the Green Lady, and Herd, how they are in Panithor, there is something very interesting there, right? It's a different take on Beastmen, it's a different take on the tree lovers and so on and so forth, or the elementals. But it could use a refresh or being brought back to the front and update a bit of the fluff and build more onto it and so on and so forth. I think there could be interesting things. And again, going in the not good versus bad, it's Force of Nature, they are above this, right? They're neutral, but in a way that they are actually above good or evil. That's not how they approach the world. And I think there are interesting themes potentially to develop there. So that could be another good candidate.
I think we know neutral is the actual good in Panithor. Sorry, Gerry.
No, I'm just going to throw my oar in here regarding the Basileans and a possible army. And this is pure conjecture and speculation based off the Kings of War page on Mantic's website, where the Order of the Brother Mark are on there since they redid the website. None of the other ones are. Order of the Green Lady's not there. And there's a little find out more, and when you click on it, it contains just the Basilean stuff. And I'm wondering if a cheeky third army, if they refresh the Basileans next year and then maybe bring the Order of the Brother Mark to the fore a bit more as a little additional army and go in a weird way with that. Because they're just lurking at the bottom of that page, and there's no reason for them to be there. Because a lot of the other Rodri is not there, and Order of the Green Lady's not there, and so on and so forth. None of the other themed lists are on that page. Just the Order of the Brother Mark, just at the bottom.
It's really interesting.
And that's
why we're bringing
that
the
website was done recently.
Show.
Yeah. So I'm hoping for Basileans Order of the Brother Mark as a little cheeky third, and then I think you're right. I think it will be somebody like Undead, and it's not that the Undead models are bad, but as you said yourself, they're good. ... for their age, and people looking at the ghouls and the zombies where it's 2 models on a sprue or 3 models on a sprue. They're quick to build, which was the thing at the time, but do people want more? Do they look at things like the Night Stalkers and the current crop of plastics and go, why can't I have Revenants and Revenant Cav, which are, my Revenant Cav are still in metal, for God's sakes. So things like that could possibly come to the fore maybe.
They're good, but very generic, broad strokes fantasy tropes, aren't they? And I would be really interested to see what does Mantic in 2025 do with the Undead faction, because I think it'll be much more interesting and less generic. Super cool. For
Undeads also in Panithor, the way the rules are right now, it feels like there's a bit of everything. Like there's some of the wet undead, some of the skeletons, and it's a bit of a mess of the werewolves and vampires, and you don't really know how to place everything. In a way, it's kind of like bring everything you got, and then we'll have rules for them. And so I think they can revisit that and do something a bit more unified and so on and so forth. But yeah,
exactly, buddy.
And I think also another thing that I like is, for example, for Vanguard, there were some undeads that were not just basic skeletons, but they also are like orc zombie, right? And stuff like this. So I think there could be interesting takes on undeads at large. We've also talked about Ophidia, of course, right? Like the good undeads, like we bring you back from death, but without a bad intent. I think those are interesting tropes or interesting themes that you could develop in the fantasy world that make it, again, more a unique IP. There are undeads, like everyone likes them and so on and so forth, but there's more than just this, right? And I think this is something with a lot of potential as well. So yeah, let's see what they do. Great question.
Yeah,
I want
very
to say.
interesting. Yeah. The other thing I just want to say is we already have pushing 30 armies in the game. Unless there's a really good reason, a really compelling reason to add another army, I mean, I'd rather Mantic work on what we have already. But I like the idea of Ophidia. I think that's an interesting, the whole Jarvis thing, and ethical necromancy is an underappreciated subgenre, I think. Super, guys. Yeah, great question. Super. So let's move on to the next question, which is addressed to Clem. Hi, Clem. And this is, from Mark Knight. Hi, Clem. Will you be adding Halo in the mix, seeing the release date is getting closer? Thanks, Mark. Clem?
I think yes. So personally, I said I want to be kind of on the back seat with it. Like I don't want to just buy all of the stuff right now and push forward to bring it to the tables. But as soon as some people play it, I will happily play it as well. And I'm definitely keeping a close eye on it. And I think you, Chris, you mentioned you have the Pathfinder stuff coming up for you, and play games. And so, yeah, I mean, it's still the Mantic Universe podcast, and Halo is in the Mantic universe. It's not Warpath, it's not Panithor, obviously, but it is a Mantic game, and so it definitely will have a spot in the future shows, I believe. So, yeah.
Welcome to the Mantic License podcast. No, absolutely, Clem. I think you hit it. I mean, I'll be honest, I wish I had more time to play Walking Dead and Armada. And I think Halo will sit among those games I go, this is a really good game. I wish I had more time to play it. But I think that's going to be a thing. But, yes, it will be. It will be in some parts of it. And, if one of our regular guests plays Halo, of course, we'll be talking about Halo because, funnily enough, dear listener, we talk about the stuff we play and paint and all the rest of it. Super. So thanks for the question. So next question is from Peter Thomas Swift. After receiving a firefight taster pack at Clash, which contained 3 Sedan figures, should I go Space Samurai in Dead Zone? And then brackets, note, there is only one correct answer here. But more seriously, what will be your next Dead Zone faction if and when you tackle one?
So, I mean, you already know the answer. So I'm not sure why you ask. We grant you permission to follow your desires and dreams, Peter. Please go ahead and get those nice lizards that tickle your fancy and have a great time with them. So we officially authorize you to enjoy them.
Yeah. I picked up the actually at Clash of Kings. I picked up the Space Samurai box, the 2-player starter box, Edge of Sanity or Edge of Insanity. It's one of those.
Edge of Sanity, I think. Yeah.
Yes. I also picked up the extra weird little robot-y thing, because then that put me over the 30% off threshold. So I'm all about that. So I'm very much looking forward to doing that at some point. And my good local friend Andrew, who plays Kings of War, has said, well, I can see myself doing Dead Zone. I can see myself doing Firefight. So, so that's cool. Super, guys. Next question. So Rory Quinn. Hey, Rory. So curveball question. But are there any other intellectual properties you guys would like to see Mantic acquire? Like Hellboy, Halo, and Walking Dead? And what kind of game would you like to see them adapted to if you had your dream choice? I'm rereading Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time book series, and I can't help but imagine a Kings of War style war game. There's different cultures in the books, practically ready-made for different game factions and a version of the Kings of War. Game mechanics could be used for the rules, the way Dead Zone was used for Halo. I think Wheel of Time is not likely to ever happen, but as it's too niche. But just as an example, thanks for the question, Rory. I think it's a great question. I already know what my answer to this is, Gerry. Do you want to go first?
Well, I'll jump right in with Rory and say that's not niche. That's amazing. I love The Wheel of Time. I love it so much, except for Book 6, Lord of Chaos, which is a terrible book, and I hate it so much, and I suffer every time I reread the series. But I can see it, and I can see it, Clem, easy now, calm. I can see it in 10 mil. I think if they do another IP, and if they were to get Wheel of Time and do it justice, you wouldn't just want to do a 28 mil Kings of War Wheel of Time, because all you're doing there is cannibalizing the current crop of Kings of War players to move them into a slightly different but adjacent game. However, if they took Kings of War rules, added a command and control structure to it, similar to the likes of Hail Caesar or War Master or that sort of thing, where you have to control the massed armies, because the thing, if people haven't read The Wheel of Time, is it is the apocalypse. It's the end of the world. It's good versus evil, and all of the nations suddenly start fighting, and it escalates very quickly. So if you imagine 4 years, there has been, if not peace, then skirmishes every now and then, and maybe 1,000 men aside will come and clash at a border somewhere. But with the return of the dragon, essentially the guy who will defeat Satan and save the world, but possibly break it at the same time, like he has done thousands of times in the past as he's reborn era after era. And so these 1,000-men border skirmishes become tens of thousands, become hundreds of thousands, and armies that haven't been seen in millennia are fielded. So you want that broad scope, you want massive sweeping armies, and 10 mil is the way to do that. And you can have your white cloaks, which are the sort of the Templar Basilean-esque filth. They will cut out the cancer by removing half of your body style thing. You've got your Trollocs and your Fades and the corrupting influence of the Shadow with their dark friends. There's lots of different styles of armies, all within a very similar power level, and then they've got magic off the chart, but magic users are either completely shunned, white cloaks won't see them and will kill them if they see them, or some people have an uneasy alliance with it. So it's a fascinating IP, one that I think would lend itself beautifully to wargaming. But I would take, like they've done with Halo, where they've gone dead zone and then we change how it kind of works. We'll add things in like shields and respawns and that sort of thing. Kings of War, shrink it, add in a command and control structure, and then go from there. And I think that would be, I want it so badly. You've no idea how much I want Wheel of Time, Kings of War, Rory. Just say.
I mean, and so as we're playing it, we got to listen to "If I Could Turn Back Time, if I could find a way." Clem,
how do I mute Chris? I absolutely love the idea of doing Mantic War Master. Right, I even started working on it. Like I have draft of rules for this, because I think there are very interesting game mechanics there that I play War Master, like the War Master Revolution version, and it's not so satisfying because it's now a bit aged and there are a few issues with rules and so on. And so I think getting Mantic to do their magic to a rule system of this style would be mind-blowing. So that's just for the core of it. I fully support it. Now to get back to the question, I don't necessarily have one IP in mind that I'm very looking forward to having on a tabletop. I'm thinking of it more in a strategic term, right? And so for me, the role of such an IP is to bring in people who would not have gotten to tabletop otherwise. And so I think in that regard, the Halo 1 is brilliant because it's people who probably had some sort of exposure to tabletop, maybe from far away, but without really a push. Or it's because it's kind of scary. Like if you know no one who played Warhammer before or played Warhammer today, and you want to try to get into this whole thing, first of all, how do you even come across Mantic? It's very, very hard, right? And once you do, or if you come across other tabletop stuff, then how do you plunge into those universes? It's a huge, huge step. So this is for me a fundamental issue that we need to tackle.
Sorry, Clem, I'll just interrupt for a second. Yeah, part of the reason this release is so smart is because you can just treat it like a board game. The pieces are pre-made. There's only a couple of them. They're different colours. There's the red team, the blue team. You can treat that like a board game, and you can enjoy that product without even realising you're playing a tabletop game.
Absolutely. So that was my second point. So first of all, it brings in new people that were maybe on the fence or would have had a hard time approaching the hobby otherwise. And then number two is it's a self-contained thing that is not as scary as getting your first 40k army or your first Kings of War army or whatever. Even though we're working on it and making it more approachable, for a completely new player, completely new person, it's still a lot. And so I think an IP like this can be a good spot to do these introduction games. So, and it's not to a derogatory term. Like, I mean it with a good side to it. Like, Dead Zone is an awesome game. It's simpler to some extent than some other games, but it's really a quality to it. And so for me, that's a very important aspect of potentially an IP game like this. One of the IPs or like the directions that I thought about or like always have somewhere in my mind is my wife reads a lot of fiction and so on and so forth. And there are tons of great modern fantasy books or sci-fi books that are not connected to, I would say, the boy classics, right? And they target a different audience, like more audience like my wife, right? And I think there aren't so many tabletop games with this type of audience or this type of universes, but I think there could be something very interesting there. I don't know exactly which one or how to do it exactly, but to me, IP game needs to bring new blood into the hobby, right? And so that would be the angle I would look into it from, like which population or like which group, which IP seems like a good target for someone who might be interested in tabletop but hasn't gotten to it yet. Now, how do we bring these people into our ranks? I think
it's a great point, Clem. With the acquisition of Riverhorse, they have got the rights to things like the Labyrinth, or I assume they have anyway.
Yeah.
And my good friend Chris, who was on the last episode, his wife has that board game and she absolutely loves it. And maybe that's a good example.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, like Gerry said as well, what you don't want is them releasing a game that is too adjacent to what they already do and it just cannibalizes their own sales. Like, you don't want to take away Kings of War player into something else. You want to bring in new player. So I think that's also something interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, from what I would play, I don't know. The universe that I really like is Terry Pratchett's. But can you do a tabletop game from it or something else than a role-playing game?
There was one at some point. I never played it. I thought there was one, Gerry, at some point.
There's a range of miniatures that's still out there from MicroArt Studios. Do them, which are fantastic, and I own them all just in case, because I live in constant fear of licenses disappearing and me not having something I wanted. There's a game coming out soon from Grey for Now Games, who did the Test of Honor Samurai game and 0200 Hours, the World War II Covert Ops game, which are interesting adaptations of skirmish games. He's currently doing a fantasy game called Guards of Traitors' Toll, which is essentially guards going around and doing stuff within a city. And so many people have just come in and went, I'm going to be playing Discworld. This is Ankh-Morpork. I'm going to be a guard in Ankh-Morpork, and I can't wait. So there hasn't been a specific miniatures game for it, although there are specific miniatures. There have been a couple of board games. There's Nanti Narking, which is a Victorian game from Phalanx, was originally released. It was written and released by some guys in Northern Ireland as a Discworld Ankh-Morpork game. And so there's been board games and bits and pieces, but no, nobody's done a nice miniatures one for me yet.
This is Rob Fnuff from the Counter Charge Podcast, and you're listening to the Mantic Universe Podcast.
I might also like Discworld a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, another universe that I could think of that I find pretty cool is Dune, right? And there's also
Clem, come on, I was building up to that. Come on, you've just taken all the wind out of my sails.
That's the one you wanted to come out with, sorry. But again, it's a similar thing, right? When you think about it, from what I understand, the Lord of the Rings miniature games kind of saved Games Workshop at some point, right? Like you gave them huge exposure and brought back a bunch of money when they were struggling financially. And so I think that's another angle to look at it, like find a very mainstream, massive IP that has, huge movie releases.
That Mantic can afford somehow.
And somehow managed to snap in the right and be like, yep, we're going to make a tabletop game for the release of the next Dune movie or whatever.
Yeah.
So sorry, Chris, you wanted to say something on...
Yeah, so I was going to throw it out there and say, God knows what the game would look like, but I'd be very interested if there was a Studio Ghibli tabletop game somehow. And then I was going to say, basically, most nerds talk about The Lord of the Rings as the book they read when they were, 12, 13 years old. That really means the most to them. For me, it's Dune. So, that was the book I read probably 10 times, yeah.
So what does it look like? Is it a firefight, reskin? Is it a completely new game? It's a board game? What is the perfect Mantic Dune game?
It's a skirmish game, I think. It's a very objective based skirmish game where you can set it on, you'll have a little strike team and you can maybe 10 to 15 models, something like this. And you can set it on Arrakis, you could set it on Gidi Prime, you could set it on Caladan, wherever you like. So the tables could be really, really different. And it's going to be full of assassinating people and managing your shields. And I could imagine that being very exciting, attacking harvesters and trying to blow up harvesters.
Can I say one thing? For me, it's Necromunda made by Mantic. So it's a very, very campaign-based skirmish. So you play a small team of fighters and they have to survive in the desert.
This would be super cool. And
you
could have, let's say,
tons of various missions.
We're smugglers and we have to hire mercenaries and
whatever, different types of small teams. But it's borderline a role-playing game, right? You have some miniatures, you have some tabletop-like tactics, like you roll dice for fighting, and you have some positioning and so on. But there's a huge, huge, huge work on the campaign side of it. Like, how do you guys do over time, and do they manage to reach their objective for the faction or whatever?
And your guy gets captured by the Harkonnen, and he has to go to Gidi Prime and fight in the fighting pits. And
you play the Harkonnens, right?
Exactly, right.
Yeah, you have how many rebels did you murder last week? That's not enough. What are your KPIs like?
Exactly.
As long as I get Sting in a winged codpiece, that's all I want as a miniature.
So good.
Yes.
Good.
Sadly, it's the wrong IP, but
it's fine.
I will kill him. No, that film was all over the place, but I still love it. I absolutely love it.
I just, on the subject of IP, before we leave it, I'll throw this little nugget in for people. So Ronnie was over for The Walking Dead. We ran a boot camp. I wasn't working for them at the time. They ran a boot camp at Beast of War. I was there attending and playing. And in the bar on the Saturday night, when Ronnie was absolutely steaming, Ronnie was talking about the fact they were talking to Blizzard about World of Warcraft. And that went nowhere in the end. But at one stage, he was very happy about that. And I'm going, but what are you going to do with that? Is it going to be small scale? He's going, no, 10 mils, no size to play a game at. And that has intrigued me ever since. What was Ronnie's idea for Warcraft? Because in my head, Warcraft is obviously mass battle. World of Warcraft, very different proposition. And I was thinking, would that have been his dungeon crawler instead of Dungeon Saga? Would we have been looking at a 5-man dungeon team, or then that you could blow up to like a 10-man raid in the same way that Warcraft works, where your tanks have to get the aggro and hold the people on them, healers are healing them, and DPS are trying to take things down quickly, trying to recreate that on the tabletop and do it in an interesting way within Blizzard's world. I'm just going to throw that little nugget in for people just to get really annoyed about the fact it never happened.
Back then as well, it was so successful, wasn't it? Oh my goodness, what if?
I think that's another good source of IPs, like a very successful video game. Take that and then convert 0.1% of players into tabletop, and then you have massive hordes of people joining comparatively. So that's a good point as well, Gerry.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Gerry. Super interesting. So our good friend Wolfgang Vigitstier is asking, how would you convince an experienced player to play Kings of War Ambush? I guess he means an experienced Kings of War player who's sort of snobbing it. Oh, no, I don't want to try Ambush. It's small scale and boring. Yeah.
Right. I've asked him to precise the question. It is exactly like someone who has a 2,300 point army. How do you tell them, hey, play 750 points?
To me, it's really simple, right? It's a Tuesday night. I can get 3 games in instead of 1 game in. I can play against a couple of different opponents. I can take smaller units, which you wouldn't take in Kings of War, full battles, which are interesting. It's a different way of looking at the game. You can play on a smaller space, and it's really fun. It's really, really, really fun. It's a small scale, big fun.
Yeah, I think for me, before it came out, I was a bit worried that it's kind of boring. Like, why would I just reduce myself to playing with a third of my army when I could play with all of my toys and get the actual full experience? But that's the wrong way to look at it, right? Like when you play Ambush, you still play actually full Kings of War. Like you still get the full taste of it, at least to me. And so I think for a lot of people, like experienced Kings of War player, is just sometimes just force them one way or another to give it a try. Like, please stop imagining how boring it must be to play with a third of your army. Just come over and let's play it, and you'll see it's actually a lot more fun. Then all of your arguments are also pretty good, Chris. I think to me another very important aspect of it is simply, do you want to play with the same old 2 people, 2,300, or do you want to play with 10 new people? And if you want to play with 10 new people, well, they have to start somewhere, and it will be 750 points Ambush. So just organize an event with, keep the community alive and with new faces. And so organize an event for Ambush. And then the regular players, like, you still need to convince them that still you need to show up. That's interesting. That's how we keep building the community. And then they will see, like, it brings in more people and it's still very fun and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's a great point, Clem. I mean, as someone who's, building a still relatively small community, but we've gone from having, me to having about 10 players in 6 months or so. We've been playing Ambush. And I think if I'd have just gone in with my 2,300 points, playing with a friend, and people go, oh, this looks cool, a lot of them would have just been frightened off. I don't know how many people would go, yeah, this is a realist. I'm really going to paint this up and come back and we're going to have a game. Whereas if you're playing Ambush, it looks way more achievable, right, for new players to come in. I think you're absolutely right, Clem. So I think Ambush is huge. I mean, Vanguard was never going to be the gateway into Kings of War for lots of different reasons, right? And Vanguard is a good game in its own right, but it was sold as the gateway to Kings of War, and it was never ever going to be that. Ambush is 100% the gateway into Kings of War, and actually, do you know what? It's great fun in and of itself. So, Tuesday night after work, you're rushing, you've had a long day, you can still play 3 games and have a great time. And it's quick and it's easy. You've got a small little box. It's brilliant. And you do use units that you wouldn't necessarily use in the full game of Kings of War. It does. It changes. It just sort of mixes things up a little bit. It's just interesting. Super.
Gerry, you wanted to say something on this too?
Yeah, I would go for some specific events for Ambush within your community. And by that, I mean either maybe a narrative campaign where you ramp up. So over a weekend or a couple of weeks, people are playing Ambush, and then those games tie into bigger games. Or alternatively, run a league. So get all the players to play, and you're looking to play home and away matches, essentially. And you can work out what home and away means for you, whether it's the home team gets to pick the board edge for the home terrain or the scenario that they're going to be playing or whatever it happens to be. And then, points, you get whatever it is, 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw. Just run it like a football or a dreadball league. And just because you can play multiple games in a day, and sometimes when you're trying to organize campaigns that run for weeks or months, people drop out. However, you can do, like you say, 10 games in a day of Ambush really easily. They're very quick, 20 minutes, 30 minutes in and out. Go for lunch, come back, play another 2 or 3, do it again. And then by the end of the day, people have played 10 games against 10 different opponents, or 10 games against, the 5 opponents, and then just have your league rankings as well, and get people a little spot prize or whatever if you happen to be in that way. But just change up why you're playing it, rather than just because obviously it's a great way to bring people into Kings if they haven't played it already. But if you've already got people playing Kings, then having a fun League Cup game to see who's the best ambusher could be a lot of fun to do as well with your group.
I think one more argument in favor of trying Ambush is someone who plays 2,300 point army maybe at some point will want to start a new army. And when they want to start a new army, maybe they want to start with 750 points of Ambush. And so if you have an old player that still plays their Warhammer Fantasy Undeads as Undead and Kings of War, and maybe one way to convince them to give Ambush a try is like, hey, why don't you play Trident Realm? And then, just get an Ambush box. Huh? Yeah, you get these couple of boxes, and then you start your new army, and then you start at the Ambush phase, right? So that's for me another angle of approach on it.
Yeah, the key to me with those Ambush boxes is it just gets people playing, and you can build from there, but you're playing and having fun. I just think it's what Kings of War desperately needed for such a long time, and it's such an obvious and elegant answer to the problem of how do you get new players into a rank and flank game. It's brilliant. Fantastic, guys. I think we've covered that one. So Mohd, who was on the call earlier, dear listener, is releasing the Abyss models before the army list. A mistake. We know the new profiles, but we don't know the overall changes to the list. Yeah, maybe. What do you think, guys?
It's always a complicated one. I think I personally, my brain wants to say, yes, I need to see rules before I buy a model. And then my heart is like, nope, I don't care. I like this model. I want to buy it. And then I figure out how it plays. So it's always a bit hard, right? And there's always a bit of a thing. And you could also argue that the time difference between the release of the models and the release of the rules is like, 3 weeks, a month? At max. It's not that crazy, right? So I think if you already know, I like the style of the Force of the Abyss, I want to make an army of them, well, you can start, buying a few things and paint them, or test your paint schemes and play with the current rules maybe to get some ideas about how it goes, and you'll see the changes. Because we all know it's not like the armies change entirely from before and after the update, right? Like there's new things coming in. It's not like earth-shattering changes.
They haven't suddenly became angels or something. Yeah.
yeah. It's not changing entirely how you build everything. So probably if you like the models for the Molochs, you might take Molochs anyway in your army, right? Unless you're a very cutthroat player and you plan to win Clash of Kings or major tournaments, but then you're in a different category, I think, and it's not that big of a deal.
Cool. So Martin Hawk is asking, hey Martin, what would you recommend to do for people for setting up and grow your own player base for the different games from Mantic? If you are the only one guy playing Mantic systems in a hobby bubble when no one else plays your favorite game. So basically Martin's saying, I'm on my own. There's no one around me playing Mantic games. I think we talked about this quite a lot recently, just from my sort of perspective. I think, firstly, don't talk about Mantic games. I would pick one and be consistent with one to grow that first, right? So say you really like Kings of War. Okay, I'm growing Kings of War. Because I think if you keep chopping and changing the game, I think it sends the wrong message to players. Just be consistent, buddy. Turn up, play in public. Have a friend play with you, start with Kings of War Ambush, make sure you're super approachable, and if someone comes and shows an interest, be friendly, be fun, because you can have the best game system in the world, but if the people that play it locally aren't fun to be around, hey, guess what, they're going to pick something else. So I think there's lots of little tips we've got, which I think we talked about at length recently. But I think to me that's the key. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, I agree. Consistency is really what brings people in, because seeing that if you decide to join this game, there will be someone to play with, and it's someone that seems nice, and these people seem to have a good time. I think that's a major argument in favor of a game, or against it also sometimes. So I think you're the prime example of it, Chris, right? Like you start with almost on your own locally, and then you find a good spot to go play regularly, and then a couple of friends who maybe come and start and play with you, and then that automatically brings in more people. And so the first 2 or 3 people are the hardest to recruit, and from there it kind of snowballs into a much larger thing. And the consistency and being visible and easy to find and easy to approach, I think, are critical elements.
Consistent. What do you think, Gerry?
The 2 big things for me: enthusiasm. Be enthusiastic about it. It's your hobby. You're playing it because you like it, and that comes across when you're playing with people. So just be 100% behind whatever you're doing. The other thing is presentation. It's very difficult to encourage people to play if you're turning up and you've got a lunchbox and a couple of Bic pens on a table for obstacles and a half-painted army against a rack of bases or whatever it is. So whenever you pick whatever game it is that you're keen on getting started, make sure you've got what I would class as an introductory set. So 2 forces, whatever they are, ambush, dead zone, strike teams, whatever, a set of painted terrain. Doesn't need to be the best in the world, but painted is better than unpainted, regardless. And these days there's so many things, speed paints and the like, that you can use to help you. So even if you're not a great painter, but you're putting on a show.
Sorry, Gerry, it's about just making an effort, right?
Yeah.
Showing that you made the effort. You don't have to be the best painter in the world, but you've put care into it. It matters to you that you're trying to attract people.
100%. And when somebody walks in and they see a table with a couple of armies on it, a dead zone board with all the terrain on it and set up, and see somebody playing, and they'll be going, "Oh, what's that over there?" Well, especially with something like dead zone where it's a very small footprint, but you've got all the height and distance with the buildings. It's a fantastic way to showcase that game, and it's a really easy entry to it. So yeah, I think, like Chris said, pick one, then get the presentation right so that people are keen to see what you're playing with, and then when they come over and have a nosy, get really enthusiastic, and then chain them to the desk, and you're sorted.
And the other thing I would say is obviously have a fairly good idea of what the rules are, but actually don't worry too much about getting them wrong. That doesn't matter. You're just trying to showcase the game, show that you're fun to play with. This is a good, positive experience for someone. If you're not sure about the rules, if you're giving a test game, actually, do you know what? It doesn't matter that much. Like, what matters is the overall experience. So don't panic. Like, just be. You know, it's fine. Everything's okay, you know?
Yeah, ultimately it's about playing a game, right? Like when I gave the Dead Zone demo the other day, I just skipped over, placing the scatter items and so on. You can remove a bunch of stuff, especially for the first few games, and just focus on keeping it fun, like keeping it enticing. Like, why is Dead Zone a great game? Well, look, you just have a few models like this. The table looks great. The models, when you have them in your hand, actually look great as well. And then you just play very quickly. It's easy to understand. Okay, you need to be up higher. Some key aspects of the rules. And exploding 8s, that's very funny. And that's it. Then you get the Dead Zone experience, right? And you don't need to go much deeper into it or, talk to them at length about details of the rules or whatever. You want to have something that looks fun and get playing pretty quickly. And then, that's how it works.
Cool. I think we've covered that pretty well. Danny Graves, hey Danny, have the MUP team decided what army they're going to take to next year's Clash of Kings? Very much yes. I'm pretty sure we talked about it, but of course the correct answer is Trident Realm. Yes.
Team Force of the Abyss will burn you down.
Oh, I like this accent that Trident Realm had. Sorry, the Forces of the Abyss had. Clem, let's stick with that.
You like this. Now you won't
bring
like
you
it
down.
when fire is, evaporating all your water. But yeah,
I'm with you, buddy.
cooking your frogs.
Oh, poor little frogs. Delicious. You just need to bring a lot of garlic butter with you, Clem, to clash. I'm sure your opponent will appreciate that. Super. Yes. Very much looking forward to trying Realm. Tom King. Hey, Tom. Should Mantic cull some armies, orcs, ratkin slaves, Rordi, etc., by letting them die on the vine? And Steve's then said, why do we need to remove any to create the space? Okay, right. To create the space.
It's just, I pasted, Steve Evans made an additional question, and then Tom added another paragraph of comments to the original question. Explaining the show notes here. Sorry, guys.
So I think the thing about this is, I think if Mantic were to make Kings of War today, I don't think it would have pushing 30 armies in it, in all honesty. I think the reason we have that nearly 30 armies is largely known that they were trying to entice Warhammer players in and make sure their armies were covered so they could come in. Now, to a lot of us, I think it makes perfect sense that they would merge armies, drop armies, etc. But of course, if you're a player of these armies, this is a big deal for you personally, right? So, I think we have to be a little bit respectful of that when we answer the question. I mean, I was kind of wondering perhaps what they could do, something like, armies that don't have Mantic models, this kind of thing. I was wondering if maybe they could put them in kind of almost an area of the app where they still have the rules, but they're kind of in a historical, maybe in the story the faction dies out,
like a legacy.
Yeah,
stuff.
Exactly.
PW is doing it, right? And people are crying out loud for it. So I agree. It sounds like an exciting idea, but then it's still a half a decision, right? Because then
it is still a half a decision.
What happens? Because that means you don't update.
Can we take it to tournaments? Exactly.
Do you allow them in tournaments?
Exactly.
So it's ultimately, sadly, I don't think it solves anything.
It's a half step. Yeah.
So I agree. It's a bit of a hard.
The Gordian knot.
It's an interesting one because, like you say, nobody wants to see their armies being squatted. The fact there is a term for it in and of itself means that that's had a lasting impression beyond the age of some players who never seen the squats before. When GW did that, and there's nothing more annoying than being told all of your investment is gone now. The fact that nearly all of them are, with the exception of orcs, which I can't believe orcs made it into that list there, Tom, nearly everything else he's sort of hedged at are theme lists from sort of main lists. I don't know if there's a major issue with balancing them every year with Clash, just letting them sort of ride on. You're not going in and going, let's remove elves. Kingdoms of Men and Rhodri are weird because they neither of them sort of really exist within the world as far as Mantic models do. Yes, 30's a lot, and I'm sure the rules committee absolutely hate it being that many. I could see, though, the Ophidians coming in as a theme list for Undead, for example. And so sticking with the core lists, you're not having to worry about adding too much more. And I don't think they need to. I think the idea of removing stuff so they can add in new Mantic armies is a wrong way to look at it. I think both Matt and Ronnie have said in the past that when they do revise a list, the idea is to bring it in and make it more Mantic. So halflings, for example, coming out of the league and becoming more defined as a Panathor dwelling race and being their own thing, wearing shoes, things like that. It's all good. And I think that's more where they'll go. Yeah, 30 lists is a pain in the backside for them to balance. And some will get used more than others. But when you look at the forces that people brought to Clash, the diversity of lists is massive, which shows that the amount of it is fairly healthy. If you were never seeing certain lists in any tournament, probably Ratkin Slaves is probably one of the top offenders up there. Yeah, I could see maybe going, well, why are we doing this? Nobody's playing them. But as long as people are playing the armies and they're not just a super overpowered force or a whipping boy for everybody else at the tournament, then I think they're probably better staying with where they are. I wouldn't want to see massive bloat by adding tons of new stuff, at which point, yeah, you would have to revise it in some way. But I think just trying to make them more at home when they get to them. So your Bretonnian army becoming the Order of the Brother Mark and Green Lady, and maybe getting a refresh and getting drawn more into Panathor and having Mantic models that you can use for whatever reason is a better way of doing it. So, yeah, I just don't like to see models going away.
I think I agree with you here. And for me, what's important is from the perspective of a new player, right? Like, imagine you're a new person coming into Kings of War and you're like, okay, what do you like usually in tabletop? Well, I like orcs, I like greenskins. It's like, and then it might be a bit confusing, like, why is there orcs and Riftforged orcs? Like, how do I choose between the two? What's even the difference there? Or another thing that I think is confusing is sometimes having lists like the Salamanders with a bunch of entries that don't have a model, don't have artwork for it, and the only reason why they exist is because GW used to make a model for these ones, and they needed rules when they first came into Kings of War. So these things, like the confusing parts, I think probably could use a rework a little bit or like some cleanup. I'm not saying, hey, get rid of the orcs and now the only orcs are the Riftforged orcs. I'm not 100% there yet, but clarifying the situation a little bit, making it easier to read a bit, like what is going on and like what are the star factions. Like if you want to get into Kings of War today, what are your top 5 or 10 potential options, right? And obviously no one getting started with Kings of War today will start with racking slaves. Like, why would you even do that? And so I'm happy to keep it in the book and keep it in the companion because it doesn't cost so much. And like the balancing obviously could also just be, we just don't touch them so much, right? Like we just don't make big changes to them. We maybe give them a small order when we add orders to everyone, or we give them a small army standard bearer with special rules when we do that for every army. We just make sure to don't make it overpowering, and they just stay around, they stay put, and it's everyone happy, right? But then what I think is important is they really should focus on what are the star factions and put those forward and make these enticing to new players, because ultimately that's what it's all about, right? Like they need to bring in new players, they need to keep selling models if they want to keep making new models in the future and keep existing. So, and I don't think you do more of this by killing off all the armies. Like I don't think that brings any major advantage to you. Yeah, that's my impression on this.
And you will deeply upset maybe a small number of people, but it's a small, passionate number of people, right? People that really care.
Yeah. And what do you even gain? Yeah, what do you even gain from it? So, I mean, you can gain what people think you gain by removing armies by actually doing something else. Because why do people even want to remove armies, right? It's just to help people move forward and get new stuff and so on. Well, you can do that without forbidding someone with whatever legacy army from playing, right? So it's just ultimately you don't want to break their arm. You want to give them a much better option so that over time, well, there's still this stuff somewhere on the edge, but it's clear to everyone what you should actually play if you join. Well, maybe buying an orc army today for Kings of War is not the most standard thing. Maybe look more into Riftforged orcs, or maybe at something else. I don't know. I think you don't need to remove the armies to reach a similar end effect, is what I'm saying.
This is Ronnie Renton, and you are listening to the Mantic Universe podcast.
As a podcast, we've really gone on a journey on this topic, because I remember saying a while ago, we should have 12 armies in a game. That's it. Start, dropping stuff immediately. But
I'm not saying something much different. Like you should have 12 very strong in the sense of very present, great model range. Those are IPs. Great IPs. Those are the 12 armies that are strongly Kings of War, and this is the main thing you want to look at when you come into the game. Oh, and by the way, there's also 20 more if you wanted to play some weird stuff that comes from somewhere else. But our core things are these ones. So anyway, yeah.
Just off topic ever so slightly, guys, and it is getting late. I've had a friend request from someone who may or may not be John Stollard, and they've just sent me something that may or may not be a scam. So this is interesting. So
The fun things.
Listen out for the next episode. Am I getting scammed?
There's a lot of those going about at the moment since Paul announced his condition and had to retire. I don't know whether bots have picked up on it or not, but there's a ton of scams actually going around connected to Warlord, Paul Sawyer, and John Stallard.
Exactly what I've just received. Yeah, fantastic. Ah, brilliant. Glad to know. Super, guys. That was an awful lot of fun, guys. Do we have? So that was the last question. So thanks, dear listener, for the excellent questions.
Yeah, there was a good batch, and I think our topic of the month we did at the start of the episode, right?
Yeah,
that's kind of what we did.
I was actually positively surprised when Gad joined, and I thought he mentioned a few things. So, we've actually mentioned this. We did all right. I give us a solid 8 out of 10.
So we did about as well as Gad at 3 a.m. That's nice.
That's what we aim for.
We'll take it, exactly. We'll take that all day. Fantastic. Hey, Gerry, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an honour and a privilege having you on. It's been a pleasure.
It's been delightful. Hopefully I'll get an invite back someday. I've burned all my bridges behind me.
Well, I didn't want to be. Oh, and Gerry has a fantastic background picture with otters, sort of an Ottoman style
it's
dress.
The Ottoman Empire, yes.
Hey, of course it's the Ottoman. Oh, damn! I missed a great pun there. Fantastic. No, Gerry, it would be delightful to have you back. It's been just great fun having you on. Quite frankly, it's all just friends talking about toy soldiers. It's what it's all about. And hey, Gerry, we're trying to good friends of ours, Tom, and I'm sure you're aware, Tom and Kevin. They're sort of on the outskirts of Dublin, and they're still looking for a solution for having an event in Ireland. I think you're not exactly down the road from them, but it's. I think there's been some conversations going on.
We on tabletop, the gaming hall there is available if we can get people to come down to it. We are, however, on the north coast, so not the farthest we could be from them, but pretty damn close to it.
Right.
But yeah,
I mean, they're still a lot closer to you than I am. So if I'm traveling, they can travel as well. And if the food is good, we'll travel. That's always how it is.
Food is terrible.
If the friends
mostly
and
fried.
Food are good, then we'll
beer
figure,
though. The beer will do the job, Clem. But yeah. And because we're sitting there with the facilities, I've said if we do it, I will switch the cage on and would live stream the top table, because that's always fun. I mean, all the equipment's there and sitting ready for it. But yeah, so hopefully that'll come together at some point in the not too distant future.
That sounds very exciting. I love this. Is this like a wrestling cage?
No, that's what we call the main cage where we record battle reports and stuff for on tabletop. Is that little studio, because we have a couple of different studios up there, and it's always been referred to as the cage. I have no idea why. Can
we start chanting, 2 men enter, 1 man leaves?
Yes, 100%. You can, yeah.
Perfect.
Bang on the doors.
I'm fully involved in this. Fantastic. I'm all in. Brilliant. Guys, thank you so much. I've had a lovely time recording this episode of the pod.
The Mantic Universe podcast. So much universe, so little time.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Gerry. Thanks, dear listener.